Last night, I heard a little boy beg his mom not to go into a liquor store. Reddit, what things have you overheard that have broken your heart? For my son's 9th birthday I took my son and a handful of friends to the movies, then to pizza, then they all slept over. On the way home from pizza the kids were commenting on great the night was, and were saying thank you, etc. Point I said in reply we love having kids over. Out of the blue one boy quietly whispered to me my mom doesn't love me. Broke my heart into bits. I asked why he said that, and he said, she always left me. I would wake up, and she would be gone. Come to find out, he had just been placed with his dad, that he barely knew. The state had taken him away from his mom for neglect, leaving him every night alone to go to the bar. It had been going on for years and the neighbors would hear him crying alone, and call the cops. She is a raging alcoholic and a drug addict, still. His dad had only met him once before, and was currently living with a new girlfriend, and she didn't like kids. His son was now sleeping on the floor of the girlfriend's apartment as there was no room for him. It was faking heartbreaking. Point to make matters worse, he sat alone every day after school on the steps of the library waiting for his dad, sometimes till past 7 p.m. When I found out I had him over every single day, eating a snack, doing homework together with my son, eating dinner most nights. Less than a year later his father asked if I could take him for a while. He had broken off with a girlfriend and had nowhere to go and nowhere to bring his son. No problem. I'm a single mom of one son, but I always have room for anyone who needs to stay. His dad brought over all of his clothes in a garbage bag, everything he owns. He never officially was mine, but I became his adopted mom since that time, bringing him to the doctors, going to parent/teacher conferences, music concerts, etc. He is 19 now and doing fantastic. He made it through high school at an honors/P level, and then went to college on full scholarship. But better than that, he is an awesome person, funny, smart, kind, loving. I love my adopted son. TLDR drug addict mom, non-committed dad, and a sad little kid who changed our lives. Edit equals from that one act, I became known as the mom who takes in kids. I ended up with 4 semi-adopted kids who stayed with us right through graduation. All teenage boys the same age, all with severe family problems. But it was awesome. And each is doing very well. Edit #2 equals thanks, everyone. You're making me cry. And I sincerely mean this. To my son and I, it was no big deal, and the joy this kid, and the others too, brought into our home was just wonderful. We got back more than we gave. And we still are. I wish I could take the time to reply to everyone, but there are so many great comments. Thank you, sincerely. I didn't overhear this, but it seems similar. When I was a child my brother used to kick the shit out of me every day when my parents weren't home. It wasn't just fighting, it was torture. He used to tie me up, shoot me with BB guns, whip me with tea towels, elastic bands, have huge elastic band phobia these days, heating up teaspoons on cooker, and putting them on my legs, etc. Not nice, especially seeing as I'm a girl 3 years his junior. One day my mum was out for a rare night out playing darts, and my dad was supposed to stay home with us. I think I was about 9 or 10. He is an alcoholic, so nothing will stand in his way of going to the pub, which was right at the bottom of my road, so he wasn't far away. I think he thought that made it okay. Well, my brother had been hinting at what he was going to do when my dad went out. Sitting in the living room he had a BB gun on his lap, covered by a magazine which he kept showing me subtly. Needless to say I was terrified. I begged my dad not to go out, crying and pleading. I never used to grass on my brother, no matter what he did, but I was so scared that I was crying and crying asking my dad to stay home just this once. He knew what was up, but he ignored it and went out anyway. I sat at his bedroom window and watched him leave. My neighbor saw me and told me years later it was the saddest thing she had seen, because I was obviously so scared. Needless to say, I was terrorized as expected. Edit. Thank you all so much for your comments. In response to questions, which I have been asked a couple of times now, we do maintain a relationship where I'm basically the person who sorts his life out for him. It's hard, but I'm basically his replacement mother. No, I have never confronted him over the things he did. I don't know if I can. I work in a castle that holds medieval banquets, one side of which is that we give out free wine. It's 2.5 hours long, so if you try, you've got enough time to get pretty sheet-faced. One day, the banquet was finishing, and we were saying goodbye to the guests. This one woman, she was fairly trolleyed, knocking into the walls, knocking sheet off of them, insulting me, my manager, and her manager who was up visiting. Her husband was out in the smoking area outside, ignoring the situation, apart from sending his probably 8-year-old son in to try and get her out of the building. "Come on mom, time to go. Dad says we have to leave now. The castle is closing," etc. I could hear in his voice that he'd seen this behavior repeatedly. It was pleading and sad, but resigned at the same time. So we got her out the door. Myself and my colleagues went to change out of costume and collected our tips. Maybe 5 minutes later, I left by the same door and headed to the car. I found the woman a few yards off the gravel path, as overtit in a large patch of briars. She'd gone to look at the view of the bay, the castles beside the sea, slipped and fallen completely into the thorns, covered in blood from 100 tiny cuts. The son was bleating like Simba trying to wake up Mufasa after the stampede. "Come on mom, you can do it. Just try to stand up. I know you can mom, please please. Just try mom." I don't know how he held it together. There were tears in his voice, if not in his eyes. And the mother faking dad. He was down at the road at the end of the path, maybe 60 yards away, leaning on a wall, smoking a cigarette, without a care in the world. I walked down to him and hissed at him to go and get his car and drive it to the foot of the path, as his wife was incapable of walking to the car park. He was as aloof as Moth, a faking Viserys Targaryen, and nonchalantly sauntered off to the car park. Me and 2 other staff members managed to get her upright, and I cleaned up her cuts with the medkit from work. She was out of her mind by this point, laughing and gurgling and wiping her faking blood over us. And her kid embarrassed and ashamed and crying nearly. I simultaneously so sad and angry driving home after work that night. TLDR, if you know your wife is an alco, don't bring her and your kid to an all-you-can-drink buffet. I was at Kroger at about 8 PM one evening. I had just gotten off work and needed to get my son some Alimentum before heading home. While walking through the produce section, I noticed 2 women with 5 children. The women looked awful, very thin, dirty hair and clothes. Their faces were scabbed. Definition could have been meth heads. 3 of the 5 children they had with them did not have shoes on. Their cart was full of soda, beer, pizza rolls, etc. There was a small toddler in the seat of the cart. He was asking his mom if he could have a banana. The mom ignored him and kept talking to her friend. The boys asked again for a banana, saying, "Mama, I'm so hungry, I have nana." Again the meth mom ignored him. The boy reached over and tried to grab a banana, and the mom slapped his little hand so hard and grabbed his face and screamed, "You don't touch that. That's not for you. You grab something again, I'ma beat your ass in front of everyone here." Then shoved his head backward. The toddler shrank down into a ball and hugged himself and whispered, "I so hungry mama." The mother ignored him again. My heart started banging in my chest. That poor baby was hungry. It was 8 PM, and you know he hadn't had dinner yet. Hell, by the looks of his mom, he may not have eaten at all that day. That bitch was pushing around a cart full of trash and didn't want to spend a lousy 25 cents on a piece of fruit for her kid. I followed that bitch around the entire store with my cell phone, set to take a picture, waiting for her to hurt her kid again. I fantasized about grabbing the little guy and taking him home and giving him a bath, clean clothes that fit, and feeding him a hot meal. She didn't slap him again, but I listened to her whole conversation about how she was gonna drop her kids off with their useless daddy so she and her friend could go party. When they got up to the checkout, they were unloading their groceries when the little boy tried to help set items on the belt. The mom went nuts again, yelling at her kid, and went to grab his arm. When she noticed me holding my phone up to take a pic, she let go, paid for her groceries with her Ohio directional card and left. When they were out the door, the cashier looked at me with sad eyes and said, "I saw you following them. Too bad you didn't get that picture. Some people should not be allowed to breed." I did follow them outside and saw them getting on the city bus. I went back into the store to pay for my goods and asked the clerk if there was any way to look up the last customer because of the shopper's cards they use. I did get her name and called CPS. I was told we will look into it. I never heard anything else. In the state of Ohio, you are allowed as a parent to discipline your children. It is only considered abuse if you use a closed fist, leave bruises, break bones, etc. Corporal punishment is considered abuse, but not slapping your child one. Sad, isn't it? I did what I could. Her name is in their system now. I went home and cried as I rocked my son, thinking about that hungry little boy, and wondered if he ever got dinner. Edit. Details and spelling. TLDR. I have never wanted to kidnap a child so badly in all my life. Was near an Occupy event in Washington, D.C. Overheard two guys about my age, 28, talking. Guy 1, dude, these Occupy chicks are so easy to nail. Guy 2, I'm almost sick of bussy. Guy 1, I should get checked. I've never raw dogged so many chicks in my life. My dick is sore, feels like it's going to fall off. Guy 2, haha bro, you should wear a condom. What if you got one pregnant? Guy 1, are you kidding me? You know these sluts support abortion. Guy 2, laughing heartily, true. It really broke my heart that people have such little respect for one another. The girls have little respect for themselves, and these guys have no respect for them or the potential life they could create. Pure hedonism. Literally made me stop and cork my head to the side and mouth what the fuck? Everyone always says I hate my generation because of something stupid like music, but this made me really stop and think, is this what we've become? Edit. Lack of respect for themselves is not due to sexual freedom or promiscuity, but due to not wearing condoms. HPV and other diseases can take years to show up and ruin their chance at ever having children. Cervical cancer is no joke. So remember, no glove, no love. I was at the toy store one Christmas buying presents for my family with my friends. I was at small boys toy section and was looking at some toy soldiers for my cousin. I hear a young mother and her son talking quietly as they walked slowly by, looking at everything. I heard the son say, "Look mommy, that man, 16-year-old me, is buying presents. Can we buy some too?" And the mother replies softly, with a tear at her eye, "No, sorry Aiden, we need money for food." The kid didn't even seem disappointed, probably so used to not getting anything. They just carried on walking. I was so upset I immediately checked out and caught up with them and gave the little boy the toy soldiers. He was so happy. I thought the mother would say no, as they usually do in these types of situations, but she saw how happy her boy was. She just said thank you, with tears of joy this time. Yeah, I told you all about something good I did. I'm a smug bastard. But I couldn't go home knowing that kid had nothing. So shoot me. TLDR boy asks for a toy for Christmas. His mom says no, because they need money for food. The kid isn't even upset. I used to live in a pretty messed up place, and next door lived a large family, grandma and grandpa, 3 sons. Also, the wife and son of the eldest son lived there as well. This kid was my best friend. I'm 27 and today he is still like a brother to me. Every single day I could hear awful fights in there. Stuff breaking, door smashing, fights, you name it. Almost every day we would call the cops. One time I even heard a large fight taking place on the building stairs, followed by the worst agonizing scream. The middle son had stabbed his own father in the gut 3 times. His father survived. Months later the son returned and his father let him in. At this point I should mention that every single son, and also the wife, were seriously hardcore heroin abusers. Now that's not even the most messed up thing. To this day it still breaks my heart when I think about what I'm about to write. It was about 3 AM and I hear the unmistakable sound of yet another fight. Yet, this one seemed different. I could hear my best friend, we were like 9 at the time, crying. He usually hid in his room and I never heard him during these fights. I rushed to the door and looked through the peephole. It appears Grandpa was kicking all his sons out of the house. The 2 younger ones left semi-peacefully, just screaming your ordinary threats, like "I'll be back" and "cheat." But, believe it or not, Grandpa was always a decent dude. He was grabbing his grandson and almost begging to his older son and wife, "Please let him stay here and have a normal life away from all of you." I stood there in horror. My best friend being pulled by both arms, one his grandpa, the other his scum bag of a father. Eventually, the son's wife punched grandpa in the face and grandpa let go of the arm. His father was, literally, dragging my best friend down the stairs. All I could hear was, "Please dad, let me take at least one of my toys. Please dad." The more he screamed, the more his dad would hit him. And I mean, hit him. I could hear it. At this point my parents were already up and had called the cops and tried to intercept this scum bag. They screamed at him to let the kid go, but the douchebag just pulled out a knife on my parents, got in the car and drove off. Years have passed, and I can still see my friend's face, tears running down his face screaming, "Please, just one of my toys dad." He now lives a healthy life, never touched drugs. He's a freelance photographer that does stuff like weddings and such. He cut all ties with his family except for his grandma. His grandpa passed away when we were like 16. Both his parents are still junkies that are in and out of jail. P.S. Sorry if I have some grammar errors. English is not my main language. Edit. I should mention that his father brought him back to his grandparents a couple of days later. If it was because he had a last drop of human decency or he just realized he didn't care, I have no idea. He lived with his grandparents until he was old enough to leave and start a life. I teach Korean adults English. As much as I hate to say it, and despite trying to be a cultural relativist most of the time, Koreans are far too often no good with animals. They really live up to the reputation. Their attitude with puppies is the same as our attitude with dolls. They're cute but something you can throw away without a second thought. My student lived on the 10th floor of an apartment building. She had never touched or spent time with an animal in her life, common for older people here, so it was a novelty when she bought one for her 6-year-old daughter. At that time, the concept of pet ownership was a new thing. Pets are all too common now. A year later, as she described it, it chewed on my shoes, which was really annoying, so I dropped a pot on its head and threw it out the window. Ha ha ha. My landlord was so angry, and she kept chuckling. I was horrified at both what happened and how detached she was by it. She thought it was strange and silly that her daughter was heartbroken and miserable for months. The really horrifying part is that I've heard similar stories from other Koreans, like, ex-pet was annoying me, so I threw it away, etc. I'm not trying to point out Koreans specifically, as I'm sure some countries are much worse, ahem China, but I always thought that some things were universal. It was heartbreaking to discover how cruel some people could be without knowing it. Just thinking about animals being hurt makes me sick. I honestly don't understand people. To help me get through that class without tearing up, I thought up a mental image of a really big dog throwing her out of that window and then laughing to other dogs about it. Probably going to get buried, and not really something I overheard, but I was at the local supermarket at 9 p.m. after working picking up some groceries. While I was in line waiting to pay for my stuff, this lady, maybe in her 50s and looks like the stereotypical really friendly / loving aunt or mother, was in front of me. Come her time to get her items scanned and paid for, she's taking a little while, grabbing items out of her basket. I don't really pay attention as I just want to get out of there. But when she starts to pay, I notice she's got some slight hand tremors and is having a little difficulty getting money out of her purse. I still don't really pay it much heed. However, when the cashier hands her change, her hands are really starting to tremor noticeably, and she's having trouble putting the money away. I'm looking at her putting the money away just out of curiosity, still feeling nothing, but then she looks up at me with this apologetic look tinged with sadness, and it strikes me. It hits me like a brick wall. I'm stunned, just staring at her and this look. She probably thought I was going, "What the fuck is taking so long?" I don't even smile or say anything, and she goes back to grabbing her items and walking out. After gathering my senses, I start to get a tear in my eye. This poor woman, alone in the grocery store having slight trouble with groceries, but because of a sinister, slow but sure infliction that will eventually control the rest of her life. I just wanted to hug her, say sorry for making her think I was annoyed. I don't know exactly what was going on in my mind, but my heart literally just broke as soon as she looked at me and I realized what was happening. Just that look she gave me. No one should have to feel like that. I don't want to make someone feel like that. Christ. I have a very good friend who is a single mom. She's basically written off the father of her son, who knocked her up and basically has seen the kid once since he was born. She really didn't want this guy in her life anyway, and released him from having to pay child support in exchange of sole custody of the boy. When he was about 10 years old, we were all together in my car, and he was sitting in the back seat. For whatever reason, his mother and I were talking about things we were planning to do that summer, and I told her that from the time I was 10 until well into high school, I would go fishing with my dad and grandfather on the beach near Big Sur where I grew up. I said that those were some of my fondest memories of my grandfather and dad, just being guys out on the shore, fishing and listening to the radio. Looking in the rearview mirror I could see tears welling up in her son's eyes. When I asked him if everything was okay, he didn't answer and just looked away. His mom quietly told me that his biological dad had told him that he would take him fishing the last time they talked on the phone. She said that was 3 years ago and he hasn't heard from him since. No birthday cards, no phone calls, just gone out of their lives. So I told him, hey, I can take you fishing. I still have the rod I used when I was your age, and I can get my dad's fishing pole the next time I go home to visit my parents. Does that sound like a good idea? He looked so happy to hear that, and then said something to his mom that just tore my heart in two. He said, "Mom, I'll probably never see my real dad ever again, but now I don't want to." He pointed to me and said, "Can he be my dad from now on?" We've gone fishing every summer since then for the last 3 years. Not only that, I've helped him with his homework, school projects, and basically been a role model for him ever since. Yesterday, as we were driving around in my car, he saw some of his friends walking on the sidewalk going our direction. He slowly ducked into his seat. I asked what he was doing, and he said, "Dude, I can't be seen having my dad drive me around. That's just not cool." I've never been prouder of my adopted son doing exactly what I would have done when I was 14. I worked in a cancer hospital for an external company that made and delivered chemotherapy. I used to take drugs to all the different wards including the kids ward. There was this kid, about 10 over 11, in there that used to play pool all day every day. He used to challenge the other kids to games teaching them how to play and then letting them win if it was their first go. I used to go to that ward about 3 times a week and he was always there doing the same routine. After my 3rd week into working there he invited me to play a game. I told him I would come back at lunch and I did, and we played a few games. I kept going back once a week to play, and he was always waiting for me with a cue in his hand. He always beat me. I was terrible. I kept up this routine for a few months while working there, and then I had to leave and find a different job. I was on a temporary contract. I told him, and he asked me if I knew anybody else he could play with. I told him that he had plenty of friends here, and he accepted that answer. I went back a month later to cover for someone on leave and I went down to the children's ward. There was no kid, no queue, not even a pool table. There was however a plaque on the wall dedicated to the best pool player I had ever seen. Not overheard, but overread. I used to work in the tutoring center at a community college as a math and science tutor. One day, a woman in her mid-20s came in and asked to see a writing tutor. I informed her that one wouldn't be in until 1 PM because there's less demand. She looked petty distraught at this, and I offered to look whatever it was over in the meantime. I'm a pretty good copy editor, but that's different from teaching someone to write better. She asked if it was okay if it wasn't something from a class, and I said it was, and she explained it was a letter to the judge presiding over the divorce of her mom and stepdad. In it, she pleaded that custody of her 2, much younger, half-sisters be given to her stepdad, their bio dad. It was an account of a long and horrifying record of abuse and neglect, starting with a period of a few months in her childhood where the stepfather left 4 points a week, returning to find this woman filthy, covered in excrement and insects, and severely malnourished. He got back together with the mother, or so I read, just to make sure this woman was properly cared for. Although what possessed him to have 2 more children with her about 10 years later, I cannot say. It continued with a similar litany of stories, as the faster raised these 3 kids single-handedly, while the mother drank. It ended with a woman saying that, while she's managed to escape, she was terrified that, if her mom got custody of her sisters, they could starve. Needless to say, someone else in the tutoring center must have been cutting onions, because when I finished reading it, I had to wipe away tears. I told her that it was incredibly powerful and to, other than correcting a few commas and a dangled participle, submitted exactly as it was, with no changes in wording or structure. If that letter didn't single-handedly win her stepfather the custody hearing, I don't know what could have, and the memory of a grown woman pleading to have her little sisters kept away from their mother has stayed with me as an incredibly sad and poignant moment. My mother was a drunk, then a pillhead, and then a crackhead and hoe. During my childhood she married 2 total monsters. From the first one I got a little sister. At one point, I believe I was 8, my estranged father asked if I wanted to live with him. I thought about it and mentioned it to my sister, who was 4 at the time. She immediately started crying and clinging to my leg and begged me not to go. I was her shield when we were small, to keep her from getting molested, and I would find us food and water, clothes, etc. I dressed her and taught her everything she needed to know. I also always took the beatings for her too. I told my dad that I couldn't leave because I had to protect my sister. Since my father was an asshole too, he just shrugged his shoulders and that was the end of that. When she was little she would always hide behind me. By the time she became a teenager she hated me and rebelled against everything I did, probably because of resentment. I was more her mother than our mother ever was, and it bothered her. Unfortunately, she has followed in our mother's footsteps and is currently a drug mule and a hooker. I've tried 100 times to reach out to her, but if you say a word to her she shrieks and leaves/hangs up the phone. Not the saddest story, I'm sure, but it's mine. I miss my shy little sister that looked to me for guidance. I couldn't hear it, but I saw it. A family I know has been going through a rough time financially. The father wrecked his motorcycle and messed up his knee in April. He's just started walking again a week or 2 ago. From what I understand it's a mess because he can't really work and is generally in an angry mindset. He doesn't want anyone's charity, which admirable, but his skill set is construction and he can't do much. The office park I work in is getting renovated and he came through to talk to some foreman, I assume looking for work. When he pulled up it was he and his son, 18 years old, a tall lanky kid who is typically quiet but friendly. I saw them pull up from my office window and the dad was screaming at his son. I couldn't make out what was being said, but the dad was irate. He got out of the car, limping, and his son got out a moment later, and the dad turned around, came back emphatically yelling and gesturing so strongly and so in his son's face. I was bracing myself for him to shove his son or hit his car or something. His son wouldn't meet his eye. After about 30 seconds of that, the dad walked inside as fast as he could. The son just stood there a moment or 2 and came in after. When I saw the son coming inside, I went around to the main entrance to greet him. He had already come in and was standing in the lobby, head hung, and I just went up to give him a friendly greeting. "Hey Travis. Good to see you today, man." He jumped and gave the most sincere smile, mixed with eyes shrink wrapped in tears. It really broke me to see him either with some degree of pride, not wanting to cry in front of someone, or just being thoughtful toward others to try and put that on. I offered him a drink, or asked if he wanted to come chill in my office by. He wiped his face a few times and said he was good. He was just going to wait there for his dad. I talked to him another few minutes until his dad stormed out and he followed. I don't know what their conversation was about. Maybe the kid stirred something up. Maybe being short on cash and wounded has the extremely irritable. I know their whole family has been really stretched, but it broke me to see him endure getting yelled at like he did and then throw a friendly smile my way right after. I know Reddit hates religion, but I served as a missionary for 2 years in and around all of central Pennsylvania, and meeting and talking with different people every day. I saw a lot of things that bothered me. The worst were always regarding children. One instance was when we were talking to a young married couple who had a toddler roughly 2 years old. It was around 9 at night when a 2-year-old should be in bed, but of course he wasn't. He was filthy dirty and running around. To get him to settle down, his parents gave him a bottle with Pepsi in it. Yes, Pepsi. Now I may have only been a 20-year-old guy, but I knew better than to give a 2-year-old a Pepsi-filled bottle. Another instance that really bothered me was when we were visiting a less active member of our congregation named Julie, who was a really nice young mother of 2 boys. She was obviously bothered by something and told us a story of how her friend was a hardcore party queen and lived a wild life. It just so happened that this friend had 2 little girls, 2 and 4, who she was always complaining about, saying they were brats and would never sleep or obey her. Well, one Friday night Julie's friend asked her if she would watch her 2 girls while she went out and partied. Julie agreed and took the girls for the night, expecting them to be as bad as their mother made them out to be. It turns out that the girls were the total opposite. Julie said when the girls arrived at her house they were filthy, quiet and so tired that they didn't last more than 15 minutes before they were out cold asleep. I'm talking dead to the world sleep, as if they hadn't slept in weeks. They slept through the whole night, and the next morning she fed them breakfast and said they were the sweetest little girls she'd ever met. So nice and so polite. And they told her how they liked it at Julie's house more than their own house because it was loud at night and their mother was always mean to them. She was heartbroken when her friend came to get them, and she could tell the girls absolutely didn't want to go with their mother. She told her friend how nice the girls were and that they could come over anytime. The mother just rolled her eyes and griped about how they're annoying brats. Hearing this story got my blood boiling for quite some time. Some people really don't deserve kids. I don't have kids of my own, but I have many nieces and nephews who I would do anything for. I couldn't imagine treating them like that. I was in a bookstore at the checkout counter behind an enormous woman and her also rather large teenage daughter. Yes, this is an important detail, with a massive stack of beauty and celebrity magazines. The mother was flirting with the noticeably uncomfortable clerk behind the counter, who apparently went to the daughter's high school. The woman was talking about how she and her daughter were on their way to the beauty salon next door and made a comment about how they always get mistaken for sisters. They were dressed alike in trashy designer clothing. I was ready to write them off as some vapid, annoying family when this tiny little boy walks up to the woman holding a book. It was The Kite Runner, and he said in a soft voice that he read in an article that it was really good. The mother snapped at him that he had enough books already. The kid didn't argue with her, or in fact say another word. His frame sunk from its already diminutive size. The mother turned to her piggish daughter saying something about how annoying her son was and paid for almost $100 in magazines. The book couldn't have been more than $7. This little boy couldn't have been much more than 11, but he looked small for his age, especially compared to the mother and daughter. You could easily tell he was a polite, intelligent little kid. The way he said "excuse me" when he walked past me, the paperback hanging loosely in his hand, broke my heart. I still regret not just buying him that book myself. In my 6, almost 7-year career in social services, working with children in foster care, I've heard a lot of things that would break anyone's heart. I've got a list a mile long, but one that comes to mind clearly, just because it was so recent, was when I was at court to testify in a TPR trial, termination of parental rights. I said my piece and ended up swaying the judge into the TPR of the father. Mom was deceased. I went back out to find the 5-year-old girl involved in the case crying into her grandmother's shoulder. Grandma is custodian. I had been on this case for several months and little kids generally warm up to you fastest, so she knew me very well and was comfortable with me. I walked over to her and asked her why she was crying, and she immediately jumped over to me, latched on, and looked up at me and said, "They're going to make me go back with my daddy, aren't they? Please don't make me. Please don't make me go back with him. Please, please, please." So I said, "No, honey. They just said you don't ever have to see your daddy again, unless you want to someday." And she just looked at me, instantly stopped crying, and said one word in the most exuberant voice I think I've ever heard: "Yay." For her it was a good outcome, but at the same time, To see a child so in fear of their own parent, and then to be so joyful at the thought of never seeing them again, it gives you an odd feeling of satisfaction, but also breaks your heart to know that things so terrible have happened to a child, that they would be scared to death of their own father, and never want to see them again. This will probably get buried, but so I'm currently at a boarding school in New Hampshire. I was walking around the town when I saw a mom and a son walking out of the ice cream store. The mom had an ice cream cone, the son didn't. The son said, "Mommy, why can't I get some ice cream?" She said, "Shut up and walk faster, you slow piece of shit. All you do is complain about what you don't have. Be thankful that you have anything." Silence from the son. About 30 seconds later, he says, "Mommy, I'm not feeling so good." "Oh, and ice cream will make you better?" "Shut up, you lying little fuck. I'm tired of your shit." And then he vomited. And I mean the holy grail of vomits. It was the largest pile of puke I have ever seen in my entire life. Made me want to vomit. Oh, and it's everywhere. All over him, all over the mom, all over the sidewalk, everywhere. We'll call him Steve. Steve, what the fuck is wrong with you? You have no consideration for others. I am now covered in your disgusting vomit. My new top is ruined. This is why I fucking hate you so much. She slaps him across the face. "Now, you are going to stay here and clean yourself and the sidewalk until it shines. Then, you are to walk home. If you are not back by 10 o'clock, it was only 8:45, you are in for one hell of a night." God fucking damn it, I'm fucking soaked in your sheet. Why the fuck are you like this? I didn't fucking raise you to be an inconsiderate little faker. Ugh. Mom got in her car and drove off, kid in tears. Me and my friends go over to him and help him clean up. We ask him where he lives. He said he lives 45 minutes away by car. So that's a friggin' long walk. We asked him what he was doing here, and he said that his mom had a client meeting in his apartment. I think Reddit can guess what his mom was doing in that guy's apartment. We called a cab, and we all got in and went to his house. Before we sent him in, we gave him our contact info, saying that if he ever wants to get away from his mom, he can call a cab to take him to us, and we will cover the cab. Never felt so proud of myself and my friends in my life. TLDR, kid vomits, mom leaves him to clean it up and drives away. My wife and I are both deaf, and we were sitting at an airport bar close to where people walk by. We were signing to each other, and this cute 7 or 8-year-old stops in her tracks and stares at us wide-eyed. We are used to this with little kids, and sometimes adults, so we both smiled and waved at her. She all of a sudden signed you, deaf. We both beamed and signed yes, she signed me too. Then her mother grabbed her and started yelling at her to stop signing, and dragged her away. The look on the girl's face as she kept her eyes on us while she was being dragged away haunts me. I felt so bad that her mother does not allow her deaf daughter to sign. The belief that signing hinders English and childhood development has been disproven time and time again. In fact, learning sign language at an early age actually improves English skills and healthy development because it gives them a strong language foundation that carries over to learning a second language, which is written/spoken English. ASL is not simply broken English. Unfortunately, many parents refuse to accept this because they either don't want to learn sign language, they want their children to be raised just as they were. They believe signing will hinder their development. They are scared and intimidated of something they don't understand. I'm super late for this thread, but here is my story. I work for a woman who runs a music school in New York. She has a drinking problem, and every time there's any kin of alcohol laying around, she finds a way to drink enough to get wasted, and I mean, can't even stand up by herself. We did a voice recital for her students, all are at the age of 13 to 18. Her daughter is also taking voice lessons and participated in the show. We had the recital at one of the parents' house, and the host decided to treat the guests with cheese, crackers, and wine. She showed up with her husband and a friend already tipsy, and drank so many wine glasses I didn't bother counting after a while. Both her and her husband got completely wasted. The house had a relatively small driveway, and at the end of the show, I needed to go, and her car was blocking mine. I asked if they can move it, and they said maybe it'll be better if you would, since we are not in the best condition to do it. You need to drive your kid home at some point, idiots. Fine, I said, and took the keys. I moved the car and went back to the house. Her daughter, only 10 years old, meets me at the front door and says, "I'll take the keys. I don't think they should be driving like that. Why the fuck does a 10-year-old needs to worry about whether or not her parents can drive her home after her big exciting show? Makes me sick." I wish I didn't have something that immediately came to mind for this, but I do. A few months ago I'm strolling through my favorite Target with my 4-year-old getting pet food, and the ilk and this rude, not so, gentleman comes flying around the corner with a basket full of men's stuff, shaving cream, razors, a wireless headset and some clothing. I was going to say something, but then an elderly woman, who I assumed to be his mother, in a feeble voice, "Mitchell, please slow down, at least let me get my sweater, it's so cold in here." The dude didn't even look back. He was doing the bolt through the aisles, on his Bluetooth, and couldn't be bothered. I let it go. As I'm finishing up I went to grab the toothpaste and there they are again. Him still yakking away on the phone and her about 10 steps behind. As they passed cosmetics she asked if she could please grab just one tube of the lipstick she likes. That other women in the nursing home, all said she needs a little color. He turns and quips at her, "You can't afford it." Against my better judgment, I was about to offer to buy it when she pulled out this index card full of writing and stated, "Now hold on, I got my social security check yesterday, and I know what I have spent." Without skipping a beat he looked back at her and rolled his eyes while saying, "You don't know what your medications cost. Do you want them or lipstick?" He actually stood there until she said she wanted her pills. I was so angry. I wish I knew which one she wanted or didn't have my son with me, so I would have felt less intimidated about getting involved. I cried the whole way home while on the phone with my mommy. TLDR, guy is in as to his mom, causing me to go to Target every third Friday of the month in hopes of buying her 10 tubes of lipstick. In Edmonton, at an Oilers game. Drunken dad with his son, maybe 9 or 10. Dad is sitting on the backrest of his seat obstructing the view of those behind. So of course a guy behind politely asks the guy if he can sit in his seat instead of on it. Drunken dad turns and gives a death stare, then turns around. Couple seconds later guy behind asks again, says, "Hey, I want to watch the game as much as you do. Can you please sit so my wife and I can watch?" Now the kid comes in, says, "Dad, please sit." For some reason, this sets off drunken dad. He spins around, starts cursing and shouting, "Don't tell me what to faking do. Don't you tell my kid what to do, asshole. Wanna fight? I'll break your faking face and take your wife home." Guy behind does the responsible thing, tries to calm the guy down saying he wasn't trying to offend him, he was just trying to watch the hockey game. Doesn't work as drunken dad still drunkenly trying to fight all while his kid starts bawling, grabbing his dad's sleeve and shirt saying, "Dad, you'll get us thrown out again. Please dad, don't. I don't want to go back to mom's." Heartbreaking point. Then I also thought this kid would rather be with his drunken, happy to fight dad than his mom. Wow, how bad is she? TLDR, drunken dad acts like an asshole and tries to fight at a hockey game with his kid crying and begging him to calm down and not fight. I went to school in Lubbock, Texas. You've seen Breaking Bad? Yeah. It's kinda like that. Gangs, meth, and attitudes especially. I was broke as shit, so I got an apartment that was cash only, month to month. No credit check. Across the enclave from me, there was a woman who had a shitty boyfriend and 2 young daughters about 2nd grade and kindergarten ages. They always played in the enclave and were sweet and well behaved. They always waved at me in the mornings because they left for school the same time I left for my job. When I got home every day, the older one would be outside the door reading a book and the younger one would be napping on the concrete, using her sister's backpack as a pillow. When I say her boyfriend was shitty, please understand, I mean shitty as fuck. Prison tattoos, beat her, abuse the kids, in what manner I don't know. I came home one day from my job at the police station. I always hid my badge when I got there for obvious reasons, and I saw a piece of white rules notebook paper ripped out of a spiral notebook. On it, in perfect purple crayon print, "Mommy, we don't like your new boyfriend." He hurts us and you. We went to Auntie Garbled's house. Don't come get us. It broke my heart. It still breaks my heart so many years later. I was outside a train station and a man covered in dirt/paint, obviously coming back from a very long day at work, was sitting on a small cooler talking on the phone. I didn't hear the entire conversation, but this is what I heard/saw. Of course, it's not word for word, as it was a while ago. All of this very soft, calm, and from a clearly exhausted man. Can I just talk to her about it myself? Slight pause. Hey Munchkin. How are you? I miss you. Me and mommy were just talking about you coming to stay with daddy. Are you excited about it? But that's not up to mommy. You get to be a big girl and pick for yourself this time. I know that's what mommy says, but she's not right. You can come stay with daddy if you want to. At this point you see his entire demeanor change. Like his heart fell into his stomach. He's not your daddy baby. I'm daddy. You don't have to call him that. A longer pause here. Munchkin. Can you give the phone back to mommy? At this point he stands off his cooler and starts to pace back and forth, and I miss the rest of the conversation. All I can is that he had the most broken and defeated look on his face by the time I finished my smoke and went to my train. About 25 years ago I was in a convenience store in Lincoln, Illinois. There was a woman, about 28, looked as if she were mentally challenged, and her son who appeared to be about 8 years old. They were in line several people ahead of me. The boy was jumping up and down and bragging to everyone who would listen that he was having a bologna sandwich for dinner with ketchup. He was obviously thrilled. Made me smile. The mom placed her items and her money, mostly change, on the counter. The lady at the register told the mom that she didn't have enough money for everything she wanted. Something had to go back. The mom looked confused. The register lady looked exasperated and made a decision for the mom. She took the cigarettes and put them back into the rack and rang up the rest of purchase. The mom left with her bread, bologna, ketchup and son. I heard some yelling outside. I could see a white trash looking man in a white trash looking car. He was yelling at the mom. Pretty soon the woman came back in. She asked if she could exchange the bologna for the cigarettes. The register lady looked disgusted, but made the exchange. Through the window, I could see the little boy standing next to the car, crying. I was so shocked and angry that it never occurred to me to just pay for the damned bologna myself. I was just stunned. I couldn't believe there existed people so effed up that they would value their cigarettes above their child's food. To this day, I'm as angry with myself as I'm with that white trash father. 25 years ago, and I still tear up thinking about that little boy who got screwed out of a freaking bologna sandwich. This happened when my son was 7 years old. He has ADHD and gets picked on a lot by other kids, so is not very social, but plays with my sister's kids on the weekends they come over. My niece and nephew were born to addict parents, are both very overweight, destructive, disobedient, and rude. But my son absolutely adores them and pines for their company when they are not around. They pick on him and tease him constantly and hit him when adults are not around. Now, this next point should not matter, but it adds definition. My sister's children are half Caribbean, half Latin American. My son is half Caribbean, half Irish. One Saturday afternoon I'm walking through the house and hear my nephew tell my son, "How are you even our cousin? You don't look like us. You don't act like us. You don't talk like us. You're weird." My son has a lighter skin tone than they do, wears glasses, has an advanced vocabulary, and is usually bouncing around the place, unless he has an electronic gadget in hand. My heart wrenched, and I called him to me, just to remind him how wonderful he was. The next weekend, they did not come over, and my son was so depressed and pouty and voiced the fact that he missed them and wished they would come over. I could not help it. I asked him why he missed them so much when all they did was pick on him and hurt him. My 7-year-old son looked at me, shrugged, and said, "That's just how they are, mommy." I had to excuse myself to go to the restroom and cry. Number 7-year-old should be rationalizing abuse. On a side note, he is turning 9 on Tuesday, and usually I take him to any theme park in Florida, his choice. Well, We had some family visit about a month and a half ago, and they stayed at a hotel, and we hung out with them there. When I asked my son which theme park he wanted to visit this year, he said none. He turned down Disney World, Busch Gardens, etc. and just wants to spend the weekend at a hotel with a pool. I have an amazing son. I was working on the road, and me and my coworker got to a small town restaurant for lunch. We sat down in the window booth and started chatting to the local labor for the same company. There was an elderly man paying at the counter. We look out the window at the highway and see two dogs playing with each other, having a grand old time, chasing each other and such, until one leads the other onto the highway. Back and forth across the highway they go, cars and trucks swerving and honking. We all sort of half stand in anticipation of the horror coming. The elderly gentleman says "Oh, you know," and starts to shuffle to the door. But it's too late. No one is going to make it in time. Our 3/4 ton pickup absolutely cranks the dog at 70 miles per hour right in front of my eyes, smashing it with the bush guard. It was surprisingly quiet through the window, and there wasn't much medical trauma. Nonetheless, seeing a live, happy, playful dog disappear like that under a huge truck was pretty shocking. The elderly man stopped at the glass door, clearly able to see what just happened. "Oh no," he said, "he's dead. My dog is dead. I'll never ever forget it." I think that was his companion. I raise my boyfriend's 2 boys. They are the joys of my life. Their mom, unfortunately, is a worthless hoe. The kids used to live with her full time after her and my man divorced. The oldest one has his teeth all capped, and they are rotten because she didn't feel like having the poor kid brush. He brushes 3 times daily with a timer and using fluoride rinse under my care. The kids were out of control, breaking door frames from tantrums if you told him no, and neglected. Little guy shit his pants until he was almost 5. My boyfriend had primary custody when we met. I'm more of a mom to them than she will ever be. She doesn't have a maternal bone in her body. She is still mom and the boys love her. Even as young as we are, they are starting to realize that I will stay up until midnight to make birthday cupcakes for them while mom can't be bothered to get a job and help us even a tiny bit financially. Here's what broke my heart: the boys see her every weekend. All week they make her pictures, and I put them in the weekend bag for them to give to her. They are so proud of their artwork. I noticed they are still in the bag every Sunday. I overhear her telling my boyfriend, "I can't stand all the crap they make for me." I throw that sheet out. What am I supposed to do with this? Every week, I remove the unwanted sheet and hide it so the kids don't find out. I can't break their hearts like that. I save a good portion of their masterpieces from each year in a giant tub personally. So sad. Last week I helped a acquaintance of mine, we are both 16, home from a party because she was way too drunk to walk and I was sober. I don't drink. I had previously put her in prone position because she didn't breathe. Turns out her throat was clogged together from spew, so I pretty much saved her life. Anyway, after walking her about 1 kilometer and constantly having to hold her as hard as I can so she didn't fall, we finally end up by her door. I knock a few times and her dad swings the door open. "Where the fuck have you been?" is the first thing he says. I stutter something about helping her home in response, and her dad proceeds with pulling her inside and slamming the door close, not even saying thanks. As I walk away, the first thing I hear is a loud slap preceded with my friend weeping. I don't know what it was, and I'm not sure I want to know either. I know I was quite a pussy for not going back to check what the fuck happened, but I was so fucking scared, and I haven't talked to her about it. I'm late to the party, but I remember this as if it happened yesterday. I was shopping in Safeway and had just paid for my groceries. I sat outside on a bench and was waiting for my ride home. Another lady, late in years, sat down beside me and we strikes up a conversation. About 10 minutes later a woman comes storming outside with her shopping cart, her 2 eldest kids, about 6 and 9, running in front of the van. She had what looked to be a 2-year-old in the cart. She makes it to the van and gets the kids in the van. I don't pay much attention as she loads up her van full of groceries, muttering under her breath and such. She closes the back, and I can see the 2 older kids bouncing around. She goes to the driver's side and pulls on the handle. It's locked. She realizes that she left her keys with one of the kids. For some reason, she started to lose her mind. Started yelling at the kids to let her in. Punching and kicking the van. By this time, me and the woman I'm sitting with are watching this drama unfold. The woman is completely going insane and started screaming, "When I get a hold of you little faking brats, you're going to pay dearly," and faking open this door immediately. The kids finally unlock the door as they can now clearly tell the game was over. She proceeds to open the sliding door and yank the 6-year-old out and smack him hard across his face. She does the same for the 9-year-old and starts to make advances upon the 2-year-old, all the while telling them how faking useless they are, and it's no wonder their dad hates them. Of course there's a lot of screaming and tears. I looked at the lady beside me, told her to look after my groceries a minimum, and call the cops. She promptly did so, and wished me good luck. So I marched over to the lady, and just said, "Oh, instead of beating their ass for having a little fun, take it out on me." She wheels around and says, "It's none of your faking business how I raise my ungrateful faking kids." My reply, "Then you shouldn't have spread your legs if you weren't able to handle the responsibilities of parenthood. I grew up severely abused, and I won't stand to see other kids in the same boat. So I say again, leave them alone. They can't defend themselves, you're their mother." She spat every obscenity at me while throwing her sobbing kids back into the van. I stood behind her van, took a picture of her license plate, and continued to block her in. She did attempt to run me over. Most I got was a good tap on my knees from the bumper, but I stood until the cops got there. Thankfully those kids were taken away, and mom was arrested for a wide variety of things, including assault, when she hit me with her van. I felt quite heroic that day, but I still feel a huge sadness knowing that there's millions of kids that go through this every day. Madam want to become a social worker, but I'm a cook instead. Happier this way for now. TLDR, I witnessed a woman beating her kids up, stood up and saved those kids from any more torture. When I was a kid, about 6, I met a little girl the same age on my block. We were the only girls on the street and played together a lot for about 2 years. It was common knowledge that she lived with her grandmother because her mom was in jail. She seemed well adjusted and normal and seemed happy. A few things seemed odd though. She was only allowed to play on weekends and had to be in by 6, even in the summer. She was also never allowed to go anywhere with friends, and we could only play out front or in yards, never in houses. I remember inviting her to my birthday party, and she knocked on my door to tell me sadly that she wasn't allowed to go. It was nothing personal, she just wasn't allowed to go to other kids' houses, even for special occasions. Come to think of it, our neighborhood always had Christmas parties with Santa for the kids, and the party was usually held right next door to her house. She never went. Anyway, when I was in 3rd grade, a television news crew knocked on my family's door. Apparently it made the front page of our daily newspaper, Big East Coast City, but I was unaware of it because my family only got the Sunday paper. It turns out, her grandmother locked her in a small basement closet from 7 PM to 7 AM for years. When her mom went to jail and she moved in with her grandmother, she started wetting the bed. Mind you, she was about 4 when it started. It gets worse. The basement was unfinished and we lived right by a river. Every house on our block, no matter how clean, had water bugs. She was given a bucket to pee in, a pillow and a blanket, and that's just how it was. I found out from the news crew trying to get a quote because they heard we were friends. My parents were horrified at the news vultures trying to get a quote from an 8-year-old and shut the door in their faces. I didn't see her for a few years and randomly ran into her when we were both around 13. Apparently, after her grandmother went to jail for child abuse, her life got worse. The paper and news didn't use her name, but her address and grandmother's name were made public. She was bullied in school and had to change schools because of it. She had to move in with her aunt, who had problems that she wouldn't talk about. I remember being so disturbed by her saying that her grandmother loved her and that the basement wasn't so bad. It was people finding out and making her life hell was the part that faked her up. It broke my heart then, and thinking about it now makes me sick. I still remember my parents and other adults talking about how they thought the grandmother was strict, but in no way did anyone have any idea what was going on. She talked about it very matter-of-factly and seemed to miss the good old days before her grandmother went to jail. At least then, she enjoyed friends and school. I still can't fathom bullying someone for being an abused child. I know bullying has always and will always occur for dumb reasons, but that seems above and beyond regular bullying. It seems sadistic and cruel. Her grandmother spent a ton of money designing her bedroom when she took her in and wouldn't tolerate the bed wetting. That, and she wanted alone time with her boyfriend and seemed to be taking out her anger at her daughter for being locked up on her granddaughter, who was an amazing kid. Very polite, good grades, friendly. I'm tearing up thinking about it now all these years later. I probably should create a throwaway for this due to some confidentiality, but I lost sleep over this more than once, so fuck 'em. I work in security. Back a few years, like 5 or 6, I was working for a company that did the odd job for Docs equals Department of Child Safety. The security company really only a few basic things like paperwork, transport, that for some reason or another needed to be taken via secured bag or by courier, and I think we only did the jobs when their normal courier couldn't get there. One time though, they had a father of a child make a range of credible threats towards the staff at an office. The job was described as look out for this guy. If you see him just call the cops, and seemed pretty basic, so figured I would do day shift for a week, no big deal I thought. What I didn't get told is that the office where I was going to be was also one of the sites/offices where they do the supervised visits. This meant that they had a room. Oh fuck me, was this room full of creepy and sad and somehow angry. I figured the dents in the room were from just furniture being moved around, but no, they were from parents punching the walls when they were not happy about the various things that docs had to do. One of the larger ones that I pointed to was from a dad that had been told his time for the week was up. He did not manage his anger and thought the wall should be punished. That got them funding for a camera to record the room. So it had a silver lining, but it just added to the creepy factor of the one-way mirror. The staff liked to tell me how they really liked that it was the first time security had actually been hired to stay inside the place, and it made them feel safer. I guess that would be normal, but to be honest, I was never going to get into a punch up with a guy over his kids, because really, unless he is going to hurt other staff, does it become a grave issue before someone gets hurt. So anyway, the day was actually quite different than I expected, and it wasn't violent in any way. 1. The first parent of the day arrives for her supervised visit with her kid in the room, but was turned away because she was drunk at 8 AM. But that doesn't sound so bad, does it? Except that I then had to take her by the arm and walk her outside because she didn't want to leave without seeing her kid. I stayed outside for a few minutes to calm her down, and whilst she was telling me her long boring excuse-riddled story, she then pulls out a faking flask and starts drinking some more to calm her nerves. She started crying, and at first I wasn't sorry for her because she continued to drink while she was being banned by docs for drinking, but she kept going on about how she was sorry for her waste of a life and told me to hug her kid for her as she was going to find a bus and walk in front of it. Of course I was a little taken back by this and called the police to tell them that this drunk lady was walking around town looking for a bus. She was gone by 8:30, so that gave me way too much time to rethink the events and second guess my response. Maybe I should have just jumped on her and pinned her down until the cops could pick her up right there. Maybe I should have tried talking her down more. Maybe I should have taken the flask away from her. I don't know if I should have done anything at all. All I know is that she went missing. After that I check in with the doc's office 2 or 3 weeks later, and they had her listed as a missing person. Since that morning I still replay that conversation in my head and get a bit depressed that maybe I didn't do more, but I don't know how much anyone could have helped her. Really, it was the start of suck that continued for the next 8 hours. 2. The next appointment was for 9 AM. Another mum that was meant to spend some time in the room with her kid with 2 doc staff members because she likes to beat her kids when the drugs wear off. She stayed for less than 40 minutes of her hour and asked the staff where to get needles on her way out. The staff gave her a printout/flyer of the local pharmacy and told her that she would now be subject to random drug tests if she ever wanted custody again. She declined the drug tests and gave up all rights to the kid right there. Bloody hell, that was seriously cold decision making. While she was signing the paperwork, the staff even called the police to come over and search her. She was arrested at the front door for drug possession. I honestly think I died a little on the inside after that. I just didn't think people were that faked up. 3. A nice mid-morning 10 AM appointment. The visit is a father that has one monthly time for an hour in the room. The alert for him is that the camera must be recording in the room and there must always be 2 staff minimum in the room with the kid. They asked me to be behind the mirror for this. Of course I asked them if this was due to violence and was told that the guy was not violent in any way and could be knocked on his ass fairly easily. The issue was the guy was allegedly responsible for abuse and sexual molestation of his kids for more than 2 years. After the mother died, when they were young, the father had raised them for a while, but was now waiting to answer charges of being a kiddie faker. I still don't fully understand what the quirk in the law allowed this, but the staff were pissed off about the whole thing and could only tell me that the law had some stipulation about being allowed to visit as the sole parent until the jail time, and he was not convicted at that point in time. I had always assumed this sort of sheet was cut and dry about molesting kids, but as it turns out there are whole legal books written about the grey areas and the requirement of police to collect evidence and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. I was still doing okay about the whole thing until the guy showed up. He was a total douchebag and started his visit by arguing with staff about the fact that he was required to be in the room with other people. He never really got angry while he was putting his side forward, but was shut down when the staff gave him a copy of the court order that gave him the visitation right in the first place. The first condition was that they will always be supervised visits. The staff were actually more ticked off about the whole thing because apparently they have to tell him every time he comes in, and every month he says he forgets the condition of the court order. That caught the guy smiling when they made him a photocopy of the order again, and I called him on it. He claimed he was just looking forward to seeing his daughter again. I shivered. This guy just used out the creepy. I went into the dark room on the other side of the mirror, and they brought the kid in first and sat her down. I damn near broke down right there and then. My eyes were all teary, and I was glad to be in the dark alone. The girl was about 5 years old and was having trouble talking. I thought that kids talk by 2 years, but this kid had never left the house. First year of school starts when the kid is 6 years old, so she must have been younger than that. The girl sat down, and a docs staff member tried to talk to the girl and explain that her dad would be coming in soon and that she didn't have to meet him and that if anything scared her all she could leave any point through the second door, which will remain open. The girl just kind of shook her head and looked around room waiting for something. The guy came in through the first door, which he tried to close it, but the staff were quick to tell him that this door would remain open, and if he tried to close it again there would be no more visits. The guy seemed happy that he got the backup of the staff. He took pleasure in annoying people. Now I later found out that he had been warned about this before walking in. They have a briefing script for this situation. By the way, my first question on hearing that was how faking often does this happen? The answer made me quit. Along a similar storyline of that of the op, I recently read in a Reddit thread about a Redditor who was at a store. The Redditor was waiting at the checkout counter behind a woman and her kids. The woman in front of the Redditor was paying with food stamps, was buying mostly unnecessary items, and had only bought a few items for the kids' dinner. It came to be that the woman had insufficient funds on her food stamp card to buy the chicken nuggets that her kids wanted for dinner. Out of the goodness of the Redditor's heart, the Redditor paid for the chicken nuggets. But the woman became enraged and walked away, with the kids crying throughout. The Redditor then ran out of the store, chasing the woman and kids in tow with the box of chicken nuggets in hand. The woman then yelled at the Redditor something to the effect of, "I don't need your charity. My kids and I will be just fine." This broke my heart when I read it. There are some people in life who don't deserve the privilege of having kids. TL. Doctor, a very kind and generous Redditor bought food for a family who didn't have enough funds to buy it, but the woman refused to take it because she cared more about herself than her kids. My father has been in and out of jail for most of my life. I'm 20 now. I moved to the city he was being held in because I thought that maybe we would be able to patch the hole where the father/daughter relationship was supposed to be filled when I was younger. I learned that once you pass a certain point, there's no remedying it or going back. My father was still trying to be a dad to the little girl me, not the 20-year-old independent adult me. Setting daydreams of patching our relationship aside, I tried more to focus on if I could simply appreciate him as a person. I couldn't. He is a very bitter, very angry person who has never been able to forgive himself. Going to visit him, I would always leave angry and weeping bitter tears for this man who I wanted so badly to move on in life and get help. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore and essentially broke up with him. Understandably, he took it pretty hard, saying he didn't see anything wrong. How could I do this, etc etc. What really tore at me though, is I tried saying something comforting, something to let him know I still loved him. I really hope you find peace someday. He scoffed and mumbled, yeah, maybe with a bullet. I'm not a parent. But I think there are just some things you shouldn't say to your kids, no matter how bad you hurt. Oh god, this made me remember this time I was at the nursing home visiting my grandpa. I was sitting alone while my mom went to get my grandpa from his room and there was this old couple sitting a table over from me. The man was clearly visiting his wife whom resided at the home. I'm not sure what was wrong with the wife, but I feel like I'll remember this the rest of my life. The husband was trying to communicate with her, offering her food, asking how she was, but all she would reply with was please, please help me. No matter what the husband said or did, that was always the response. Please help me, please. Then he responded, I love you, I want to help you, how can I help you? And only to be met with the same echoes. Please help me. I could see the anguish and sadness of the man's face as his wife suffered, while he was completely helpless to do anything for her. I turned around and tried to block out the consistent please help me because it was really getting to me and I was starting to cry. I hate that place. TLDR wife in nursing home can only repeat haunting, please help me to her husband. Visible pain in husband's face at his inability to help. I was working as a technician for a medical company that delivered specialty therapeutic beds and suction vacuums, and my job had me constantly running around all areas of my assigned hospital. Lots of times, hell all of the time, I would hear some really depressing things. So much begging, praying, questions, crying and screaming. The job was emotionally draining. There weren't too many days that I didn't stand outside the hospital, take a deep breath and steady myself for death or general unpleasantness. You can do this. Oh, he clearly. I could have easily written this about something some of them have said. All that to tell you this, I was walking through the main waiting area of my hospital after a particularly long and emotionally brutal day. It's not uncommon to hear babies/children crying there. Most of the time it's adults, but this time I heard a child out of breath from screaming, stop, stop. As I enter the wide open area, I see a mother grabbing this baby by the back of her shirt with her left hand and slapping the top of this child's head/face with her right. I didn't realize how quickly I was moving towards them, but when I got there the two other adults just sitting there attempted to push me away. I was completely astonished after the fact, but I just began yelling and tried to stand as close as I could to the little girl. Hey, someone help. To this day, that was 4 years ago, I can still hear that little girl begging her mother to stop hitting her. I can see the red face and tears streaming down. I can see the scratches on her forehead from the rings on her mother's hand. Stop, stop. I just can't get over it. Faking animals. My sister is 12 years older than me, making her currently 32. Her mom is not my mom, but we have the same dad. So half sister related through dad. When my sister was younger, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade-ish, she would write notes to her mom in school. You know, the school assignments, where you're learning to write and learning how to write letters, and the teacher says pretend to write a letter to your mom or dad blah blah. My sister would always write letters to her mom begging her to stop smoking. It will hurt you, it will kill you, it makes me cough, it smells, I don't want to watch you get sick. All these little heartbreaking sentences. Please, from her 8-year-old daughter to stop hurting herself and hurting those around her. Her mom would read them tell my sister she wasn't going to stop, and then hang the letters on the fridge, because she was proud of my sister's ability to write. She hung it like a trophy, but would yell at my sister about the content. She told her never to do it again, but my sister would. All the notes were hung on the fridge, where my sister could see them every day, and no, her mom wouldn't stop for her, after doing everything she could. When I was around this same age, so my sister was 20-ish, I was over at her mom's house to visit. All the letters were still hung up on the fridge. I read them all and cried. Her mom asked me what was wrong, and I said you couldn't even stop for love. You made her so sad. And I asked if she ever did stop, and she said no, that nothing was worth giving it up. It makes me sad. I think the letters are still there. Probably 15 or 16 summers ago, I was with a friend on a Long Island Railroad train. There was a family at the back of the car, 2 parents and 2 little girls. My friend and I sat right across from the mother and the kids. The father was pacing, and shirtless with obvious track marks down his arms, agitated. One of the little girls, who was about 5, was speaking to her closed fist, as if it was a doll. At first it was basic doll stuff like, later tonight, we are going to make your hair pretty. But then she said to her hand, don't ever do that again, and started hitting her closed hand with her other hand. The girl looked my friend and me in the eye and said, my daddy hits me. I'm sure the whole train heard this. It was quiet and chilling. The mother immediately interrupted the daughter and corrected her loudly. When ya bad, the mother said. Daddy hits you when ya bad. The family quickly got off at the next stop. I think about that day a lot. I was young and the father was terrifying, and I chose, along with everyone else on the train, to say nothing and do nothing in response to the little girl. I have no idea what I should have said or should done, but it was chilling and horrible to look at that kid getting shuffled out of the train for what was certainly going to be a terrible punishment for telling the train about her life. To be fair though, the way drugs and alcohol are presented to kids in school is not realistic. While I understand the situation you are describing sounds sad, sometimes kids have a skewed view on drinking or soft drugs like pot, just because they have been inundated with propaganda from programs like DARE, and as you said, you live in Oklahoma. Many a tax dollar goes towards scaring the kids straight in the Bible Belt, especially in a town OK, which is one of the 2 states in the nation that has the 3.5 ABV beer in convenience stores, which is a throwback to prohibition. I think the way kids are taught about alcohol/drugs in the Bible Belt and in other parts of the country tend to backfire, and when they grow up a bit see the facts were not so much facts as they were some cop trying to scare everyone into following the culture that keeps the low point beer around. How you can't even buy cold real beer, normal alcohol content, at the liquor stores in Oklahoma. Is anyone really going to make the argument that an alcoholic isn't gonna drink a hot beer then drive? I mean, yes, it sounds sad, but you have to remember this is Oklahoma we are talking about, where reason/logic is not something that kids are taught are important. So I mean, the kid may have had her alcoholic mom who does bad things when she drinks, but you also have to realize it could have been a misinformed kid who has been taught booze is the devil, and if his mom drinks then she's going to hell. Just playing devil's advocate, because I know how faking backwards schooling and morals/values are in the region. Throwaway account: about 15 years ago I was friends with a great guy. Typical guy with a hilarious sense of humor and would do anything for anyone, especially his daughter who he loved more than anything in the world. One evening after work I dropped him off at home and got ready to leave when he made the comment that he was going to meet another friend of ours at the local tavern for a drink and asked me to come. I already had plans, so I declined and started walking back to my truck. As I did, I heard his daughter ask him to stay home and do something with her, which he answered he was only going to be gone for a little bit, then he'd be home and they could do something then. She wasn't having it and started begging him to stay home and not go to the tavern. She wasn't acting like a spoiled brat that wasn't getting her way, but more like a child who really wanted/needed her dad. He reassured her he wouldn't be long and promised they'd do something special. I wish now that I said something to get him to stay home or went with him to make him keep his promise to be home early enough to spend time with her. I didn't though, and he never made it home. He drank too much tried driving home, and killed himself when his truck left the road, entered the ditch and struck a utility pole, leaving his little girl without her dad. No longer would she feel his touch or love. No longer hear his voice say I love you. No longer have someone as special as him in her life. I can still hear her asking, then pleading for him to stay home to this day. Tears me up inside to this day. I've had to stop a few times just trying to type this out. TLDR, just read it, and don't drink and drive. At the gas station getting my usual crap. Woman in front of me with her maybe 7-year-old son is paying for her 20 ounces Pepsi, 20 ounces Mountain Dew, and then asks for a pack of cigarettes. It rang up to about $9. The mother says, "Oh, I'll take this away," and hand the cashier the Pepsi. I'm assuming she didn't have enough money. The little boy starts to cry and say, "Please mom, I'm so thirsty, please mom." It wasn't Winnie, it wasn't Bretty, it was a little boy that was thirsty and really wanted that Pepsi. So I start looking in my purse for extra cash, thinking I will just cover what she is short so the boy can have the soda. The mom pulls out a $50 and pays the now $8 total and is screaming at this boy to shut up. The boy immediately sucked it up and was quiet. How could this woman get her own soda and cigarettes and refuse this boy something to drink? Mind you, I would not give kids soda normally, but it was obvious his mother didn't care. I was crushed watching him. Of course, I bought his soda and followed them right out the door to give it to him. With the most pleasant smile, I proudly handed the boy the bottle. He was thrilled. The mother rips it from the boy's hands, gives me the evil eye, and throws the unopened bottle in the trunk of her car. It was awful. When I was 19, I worked the door at a small nightclub. One night 3 kids came up to the door looking for their mother. I didn't know what to do, so I called another bouncer over. He said to take the oldest around the club to look for the mom while he stayed at the door. So I held her 11-year hand while we walked around a nightclub searching for his drunk mother. Once we found her, she was nothing but mean and nasty to her kids, yelling and telling them to go home, that they are worthless, and she needed this time. I was speechless. The kids were crying and pleading for her to just go home. I've never saw anything like that before. I told the mother that if she didn't leave, I would tell the bartenders to cut her off. She got pissed at me, but left with the kids. I only hope she went home. Ever since then, I make an active effort to be nice to all kids, knowing sick shit like that can happen, and that is all they will ever know. I've given spare change to kids in front of me for a piece of candy, given quarters to kids at the machines at the entry of stores, etc. TLTR treats kids like gold, no matter what, even as holes. They are that way because of their parents. I was on a 4 train going from Brooklyn to the Bronx. The train goes to an elevated platform after like 145th. There used to be lines like this in Manhattan too. They've been turning one of them into a park called the High Line. You can get a really beautiful view of the Bronx, both good and bad, on the 4, as well as a great view of Yankee Stadium, plus cell phone service. So everyone is constantly texting. Well, across from me was a weathered man who looked like 30 going on 50 and a little 8-year-old boy. The man was nursing a brown bag on beverage for the entire ride, but already looked pretty wasted. When we passed by the stadium, a game was full swing. It was lit up and filled to the brim with fans and noises. The kid was ecstatic. He was jumping on and down trying to get his dad to look at all the excitement before we passed it, since he was sitting away from the window. The entire subway car was smiling at his kid as he told all of us to look at this stadium, telling us how wonderful everything was. The stadium at the time still relatively new. It was one of those moments where someone else's reaction helps you realize the beauty you keep overlooking. But the man didn't turn around. He just took a swig of his brown bag, grabbed the kid to sit down. He brushed him off, gesturing with his brown bag. "You'll get over it, everybody does." And everyone in the subway car just went back to their newspapers and iPhones and books for the rest of the ride. Now when I'm on a 4 and pass that stadium, I try to look at with that same spark of untempered wonder that boy had. I really hope he never gets over it. When I was around 7, my parents were fighting a lot, and my mom told my dad that she is going on vacation. He dropped me and her off to the airport. Once we reached our destination, my mom called me dad and told him that she booked a flight back for me prior to this and that I was getting on it as she speaks because she doesn't want to be with him and she's running away and she doesn't want me so she can live her life. I'm 20 now. My parents are back together. My mom still doesn't know that I heard that and we have a tight relationship. Whatever happened as a child, I knew that she was just angry at dad, but I was very heartbroken. I didn't see her for about a year and when she got back eventually we weren't close and I wouldn't chill with her until a couple of years ago. She remembers that as my awkward phase. No mom. I was sad and in shock. Edit. I remember something else. A couple of years ago my cousin and I went out for lunch on New Year's. We were on vacation in Lebanon and a little kid was selling gum on the street. He was about 8 years old or so. My cousin gave him money and told him that she doesn't want the gum. He replied, in Arabic of course, I'm not a beggar, I'm not begging, I'm working. It was really nice yet sad to hear that she took the gum. Later on that night we ditched the party plans and looked for him. We found him, took him shopping, then took him to a 5-star restaurant whose manager always yells at the child for selling gum in front of the restaurant. Then we bought food for the house for him and dropped him off with an envelope with $1,000 in it. Turns out, his father is in jail, his mother is ill, they live in an abandoned house, and he sells gum, so his sister can go to school. I know that what we did can't really fix up this family's life, but we were on vacation and we couldn't afford do more than that. Not overheard, but overread. I used to work in the tutoring center at a community college as a math and science tutor. One day, a woman in her mid-20s came in and asked to see a writing tutor. I informed her that one wouldn't be in until 1 PM because there's less demand. She looked petty distraught at this, and I offered to look whatever it was over in the meantime. I'm a pretty good copy editor, but that's different from teaching someone to write better. She asked if it was okay if it wasn't something from a class, and I said it was, and she explained it was a letter to the judge presiding over the divorce of her mom and stepdad. In it, she pleaded that custody of her two, much younger, half-sisters be given to her stepdad, their bio dad. It was an account of a long and horrifying record of abuse and neglect, starting with a period of a few months in her childhood where the stepfather left 4 points a week, returning to find this woman filthy, covered in excrement and insects, and severely malnourished. He got back together with the mother, or so I read, just to make sure this woman was properly cared for. Although what possessed him to have 2 more children with her about 10 years later, I cannot say. It continued with a similar litany of stories, as the father raised these 3 kids single-handedly, while the mother drank. It ended with a woman saying that, while she's managed to escape, she was terrified that, if her mom got custody of her sisters, they could starve. Needless to say, someone else in the tutoring center must have been cutting onions, because when I finished reading it, I had to wipe away tears. I told her that it was incredibly powerful and to, other than correcting a few commas and a dangled participle, submitted exactly as it was, with no changes in wording or structure. If that letter didn't single-handedly win her stepfather the custody hearing, I don't know what could have, and the memory of a grown woman pleading to have her little sisters kept away from their mother has stayed with me as an incredibly sad and poignant moment. Reading these stories remind me of the first time I didn't hear my mom, sort of the opposite of this thread. I was about 8 at the time. My mom was just released from jail for DUI and my dad let me spend the night at her house because of how excited I was. I didn't realize it wasn't normal for a mom not to be in jail. I'll always remember when I opened the door to her duplex. The air conditioner was off. She couldn't afford to run it. There was a mattress in the middle of the living room where she was laying down watching Judge Judy. This was my mom's favorite show. She's seen every episode like 6 times. When I saw her I freaked out and ran over to her. I must have held her for an hour crying about how much I missed her and how I'm happy to see her. She had been gone for most of my school year. Her and I spent 2 hours talking about everything in my class. All the boys who made fun of me and called me gay, the teacher who I had a crush on. in the middle of a story about a new TV show I loved, Invader Zim at the time. She went into the kitchen, grabbed me an old taco from Taco Bell, and she made herself a screwdriver, vodka and dodge I think. I didn't realize it at the time, but now I realized how much she actually drank. As the day went on, she started drinking around 11 AM. She kept refilling her drink, going through a whole handle, and by 4 PM, my mom has always been a napper and I didn't think anything of it when she fell asleep for an hour, but then an hour turned to 2 hours. Then 3 hours. By now I was hungry, and I was young, so I didn't know how to use the stove or anything, so I tried to wake her up, but I didn't get any response. As another hour went by, my mom got a call from one of her friends, one who brought over the vodka in the first place. I told him she wouldn't wake up, and he told me to sit on her. I tried it, and she wouldn't respond. He gave up on trying to help me, and now I was alone to try and wake my mom up. I tried slapping her, digging my nails into her skin, pulling her hair. I later found out my mom has no feeling at the top of her head due to it being pulled so much when she was younger. I tried dousing her in water, covering her in ice, everything my 8-year-old brain could think of. I yelled in her ear and she wouldn't wake up. By this time it's 9 o'clock and Invader Zim is on. I try to wake her up by showing her the show. She wouldn't watch it or move. I thought she was dead. Eventually, my cousin called and inquired if my mom was home. I started crying hysterically because my mom won't wake up. They eventually come by and her husband at the time took me to McDonald's, but I wasn't very hungry. To this day, I will always remember how quiet the duplex felt right before the Invader Zim music comes on to my favorite TV show. To this day, I can't watch that show without thinking of that day. Edit. TLDR, mom comes home from jail after being there for 3 months for drinking and driving, drinks herself into a stupor while I'm the only one with her. My girlfriend and I walked out of her apartment and heard a woman beating on the door of an apartment a few doors down. The woman's husband was having an affair with the renter in that unit, and she was looking to confront them there. What makes this situation bad is that this woman brought her 3 kids with her. But I didn't know all of this until the conversation below happened. I knew the husband and renter weren't there. I saw them leave earlier when I first got to my girlfriend's apartment. So I told the woman that the people who live there were out. Still not knowing why the woman was so frantic and seeing her kids there with her, I asked her if everything was okay or if she needed help with anything. That's when she told me that she was there to catch her husband cheating. I'm not sure what my face looked like when I hear this, but the faces of her children were haunting. I can't remember what I said, but I convinced her to come with my girlfriend and meet at McDonald's where she can vent out the pain she was going through. I bought her children ice cream cones and my girlfriend sat at a side table while the woman and I talked. I calmed her down enough and assured her that whatever her husband was doing was not her fault, that his actions will be judged by God. This is before I became a non-believer, so I was convincing. As far as saying something comforting and encouraging to her kids, all I had for them was ice cream. There's only so much you can say to another person's children. She left with her kids. I don't know what happened next and have always wondered. My girlfriend married me several months later. I love my future in-laws, don't get me wrong, but my boyfriend's father has always been an alcoholic. It led to my boyfriend's parents divorcing when he was around 12 or so. They got remarried when he was around 17, but his father never stopped drinking. I've heard stories that are in funny context, but sad when you think about them, like the time he was supposed to go get dinner, Chinese, but went to the bar instead. 3 hours later he came home with the food, drunk, and a fight ensued, which progressed into a Chinese food fight. My boyfriend said he remembers as a child sweeping up dustpans full of fried rice because they just started throwing food at each other. The saddest thing, though, occurred now that my boyfriend is an adult. He's a very happy-go-lucky type person, doesn't usually let things get him down. His mother called us to let us know that his father was going in for some kind of testing on his liver. I'm not really sure what the condition was. I'm no medical expert, so I knew he had been stressed about it all week. We went over to visit them the following week, and he had gotten his results back. It's very important to my boyfriend that his father be around when we have children, because he's the only straight child not to have children yet. He wants them to get to meet him. When his father was out of the room, he asked his mother what was going on. She said the options that the doctor gave him were to stop drinking or die. No in between. He made a joke about how they should forcibly take away all the beer and liquor in the house, and she said either he would or he wouldn't. But he's a grown man and nobody can make his decisions for him. His father then walked back into the room with a beer in his hand. He didn't say a word. Later in the evening we got in the car to go home, and from the minute we pulled away from their house you could see the emotional pain on his face as he realized his father's alcoholism was more important to him than seeing his future grandchildren. This is according to my little sister. One day when my little sister and her friend were walking around our neighborhood as they normally do on a regular basis. They were walking down the sidewalk in front of the local middle school when they noticed a fat-ass old lady in her electric scooter, a teenage girl, who was apparently a teen mom, and a little girl probably about 4 or 5 pushing a stroller with her baby sibling. My sister felt something was odd for the fact that the little girl could barely see over the stroller, and the fact the mom was walking alone not pushing the stroller herself. As the little girl was walking down the sidewalk she couldn't where she was walking and hadn't noticed a huge crack in the sidewalk, so not being able to see it, she went over it causing the stroller to flip out and her sibling fell out of it face first. The mom turned around to see what happened. All what the mom did was put the baby back in the stroller, not even to check if the baby was hurt, and slapped the little girl. Now a thing that runs in my family, if we see something like that happen, or something similar we'll step in and help or talk to the parent, or whoever is watching the child/kids. After that the little girl who was pushing the stroller was crying, and practically the whole time she couldn't even keep up with her mom and grandma. So my sister and her friend walked a little faster up to help the little girl catch up to her mom and grandma, who were already around the sidewalk corner who didn't even look back to check on the girl and baby. Apparently noticing my sister and her friend, the fat-ass grandma had turned around and said, "What the hell are you doing?" So my sister replied, "Helping this girl cause her mom doesn't know how to raise a kid." So back and forth my sister, the grandma and mom were arguing back and forth. According to my sister's friend, he said that she was really getting mad at them to a point of cussing repetitively and saying exactly this to the grandma after she had said something like the little girl had it coming since it's not hard to walk and push a stroller. Well, if it's so goddamned easy, then why don't you get your fat ass out of your faking scooter and pushing the damn baby for her? She never really said what happened after that. All her friend said was she stormed off towards our house pretty freaking mad. About 3 or 4 weeks later, me and my sister were walking down the street when I had seen a pretty fat Hispanic old woman holding a baby in totally wrong way, as if she was holding a large sack of groceries, and a little girl who looked to be 4 or 5 walking behind her. I had asked my sister if that was the old lady and kids from the other week, and she said yes, it was them. I find it pretty sad, teen parent or not, when someone doesn't know how to take care of the kid right. Especially since it was like over 100 degrees outside, and I'm pretty sure a baby shouldn't be exposed to so much heat. All I can say is I'm glad there's child protective services. Edit 1. TLDR, a fat as old lady and a teen mom doesn't know how to treat their kids/grandkids right. Little sister helped the little girl out and called out on the mom and old lady. This didn't really break my heart, but it made me rage like no other. Growing up, my dad was an alcoholic. Being a little kid, I didn't understand it, so I just assumed he was normal, all best daddy ever. Eventually I got older, Family Matters grew worse. Family Matters the show also grew worse, and my parents split and I began to hate my dad for what he put my family through. Anytime he would try to talk to me about custody, he would be drunk out of his mind and cussing out my mom. Fast forward to last year, I got a job at Round Table Pizza. It was a slow day, only 3 people in, cashier, driver, and me. Manager was driver. The cashier was doing paperwork in the back of the store when a customer came in. He was around his 40s and his little son, who was about 8, was bouncing everywhere full of energy and happiness. He would constantly grab his kid by the arm and tell him to knock it off, but in a very abusive and angry way, not a strict parenting way. When he tried to order his food, I could immediately tell how drunk this guy was. It already set off in my head and pissed me off a little bit because this guy drove here drunk with his son of 8 in the truck. Being an employee, I had no option but to take his order with a smile. His order was to go, and for some reason, he really wanted a beer, but didn't want it in the mug. He constantly asked me if he could sample a few of the beers in a paper cup, or buy a beer in the kiddie cups with a lid, so he could take it to go. Buy a beer in a kid's cup to go. That faking set me over the edge. I kept my cool and told him I'm not allowed to sell alcohol to anyone because I was 17 at the time. He just said whatever and waited for his to-go box. When I gave him his food, our cashier came walking in and heard him ask me for a to-go cup of beer again. I told him that A, I cannot pour him beer, and B, we cannot sell a to-go cup of beer. He swiftly grabbed his kid's arm and stormed out of the place. My co-worker asked me if he was serious and how drunk he was. I just ranted to her about how much I wanted to kick that guy's ass and call the cops. There's something about an alcoholic driving his child around drunk that pisses me off to no faking end. The fact he can't just ruin his life, but has to incorporate his child into his shit-filled addiction kills me. It still bothers me to this day knowing that people like him exist, and I seriously want to end it all if I could. To make it worse, he ended up coming back in the store. I forgot to ask for something. I stood back as my co-worker went to him and said, "Sure, what is it, sir?" In the need about tree fiddy at this point I realize, okay, I'm just faking with you. Everything was true, just felt like pulling a tree fiddy at the end. TLDR, drunk comes in with his kid to pizza place, ask for beer to go, refuse to sell it to him. Pissed for life that drunks will actually drive their kids around while intoxicated. A family friend died very suddenly last summer as the result of an untreated health problem that had apparently been going on for years unnoticed. I grew up calling her my auntie. She was like, well, an aunt or a grandmother to me. Her 2 sons were like my cousins. She made me feel special and loved and cherished at a point in time where my home life was absolute shit, and I knew I could always count on her for support and a hug. Losing her so suddenly made me feel like all the air had been crushed out of my lungs for days, and it really shook my family as well. At her memorial service, a few friends and family members talked, including her 2 grown sons. After that, they showed a slideshow of her life. It was during that slideshow that her oldest grandchild, her 5-year-old granddaughter, realized that her Oma, her best friend in the world, was gone and she would never get to see her again. She broke into heart-wrenching sobs, absolutely hysterical with grief. Her dad picked her up and carried her into the hallway to comfort her. I could still hear her bawling, "Daddy, I want my Oma, why won't she come back?" I'd been able to mostly hold it together until that point, but hearing my little niece cry, "They call me auntie, it's a great honor for me," was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And of course thinking about it has brought back the waterworks. She died almost a year ago, and I still miss her horribly. I can only hope that I could be even half as important to her grandkids as she was and is to me. I was on a night train coming back from Chicago in early 2003. I had closed my eyes, and I was just kind of listening to the atmosphere and drifting off, and there was these 2 little girls whom I never actually laid eyes on talking pretty loudly right above me. Their father was with them. They were ambling and talking funny. They were obviously tired. Little kids get really silly when they are tired. I was not paying attention to the conversation until I heard, "Hey Jill, do you think you could fit this in your bussy?" I instantly tuned in and became very alert. I was like, what the fuck? I heard the dad say SHHH very sternly. The little girl said it again, but asked her father, "Daddy, do you think Jill could fit this in her bussy?" And he told her. I said, "Shut up." I heard some rustling, as if he had moved. I was extremely alert at this point, and listening to everything trying to figure out what the fuck was happening. I heard a different girl say, "No, it still sore." The other girl giggled and said, "Yeah, I think it would hurt." The father then told them, "I told you two to shut up. Don't make me punish you when we get home." There was about 5 minutes of silence and they started giggling again, and one said, "Stop hitting me," to the other girl, and the other girl just kept giggling. The father was obviously very annoyed at this point and told them to stop messing around or he would never take them out of the house again. They got off the stop before mine, and I never saw their faces or anything. I still till this day wonder if they were being molested or what, and sometimes I feel terrible about not reporting it or doing anything about it. I was just a 19-year-old kid though, and more confused than anything. I didn't believe that stuff actually happened outside of movies. Still I wonder. I'll offer too, even though they'll be buried. My younger cousins used to spend a lot of time with us, due to them having a dysfunctional mother and my mother being an awesome human being. Anyway, my so at the time and I are playing in my room. She was maybe 6, I was around 17 I guess, and out of the blue my so gives me a kiss. She looks at us and just says, "You love each other." I wish daddy could love mommy, but he's in jail. Last year, I guess she's around 11 at this point, the same cousins ended up at my mum's for about a week, and during that time my mum realized they had very little clothing. We looked them out to buy new stuff, nothing crazy, just Walmart, and we had a grand old time. Afterwards, we went over to visit my mum's other sister. My one cousin wanted to give us a little fashion show to show off her new clothes, so she went to the bathroom and put on her favorite new outfit. When she came back out we all admired her and whatnot, and while doing so, my mum's sister noticed that the price tag was still attached, so she ripped it off. My cousin has this look of absolute terror. She yells, "Why did you do that?" And my aunt explains that that's what you do when you buy new clothing. Cousin responds with, "But how will we return it to get the money back?" That's what mom does. Maybe it's just me, but it seems a little sick to give your own child that mentality. I used to live next to an extremely white trash couple with 3 kids, all under 5 years old. They would constantly play in the parking lot of the apartment building unsupervised with cars going by. Almost every day through the walls I heard the beach mother screaming things at the kids like, "Shut the fuck up. I don't fucking care. Sit down. Now. Be quiet." This would usually be followed by the door to their bedroom being slammed. The dad occasionally would chime in with a few pearls of wisdom of his own. Occasionally I hear spankings and strikes with a belt. One day the mom was screaming and crying in her own bedroom while she and the dad were fighting. She said something one time about "last time and you broke my arm, I think." They were so loud sometimes I was able to actually record their bullshit. When I complained to the office about them, the guy actually came looking for me. I wasn't home, so he talked to my friend next to me. That's how I know they were under 5. He found it okay to walk downstairs, down the sidewalk and back upstairs to my door while wearing his tube socks. I hesitated to say anything else because I didn't want him to come looking for me again. When I finally moved, because of them, I called the SS/CPS/ whatever it's called. They didn't seem to care. It is possible that this was nothing. If it makes you feel better, the kid might have just been acting dramatic and contradictory. Maybe he was just in a tantrum mood and was just denied something he wants. Maybe she just told him he can't have a certain toy at the toy store, so now he's declaring everything mom wants off base. "Son, you don't need that expensive toy. We're not getting it." So later, he started using her words to bother her, crying and whining all the way. "Mommy, you don't need gas at the gas station." "Yes I do." "Mommy, you don't need to buy that new shirt." "Yes I do." "Mommy, you don't need." "Shut up, Junior. You're making me lose my mind with this crap." All day he's been doing this because he's angry from not getting his way. Ends up she's at the store buying liquor for a little party this weekend with several of her old high school friends. Junior's going to the sitter for the night while mom and the girls take a break to laugh and reminisce. Maybe she's buying liquor for the same reason you're presumably buying scotch. About 7 years ago, my mom took me on a trip for the first time to the Philippines for one of her high school and family reunions. She lived in a pretty poor town called Palanas in Masbate. Most houses had bars on the windows and some weren't even houses, more like huts constructed of ragged wooden leftovers like trees or cardboard in some cases. One day, we were about to leave the house on a vehicle called a jeepney to go to visit the grave of my grandparents, when we saw a small boy who must have been 6 years old crying in the middle of the street and screaming something in Tagalog. This boy had no clothes on and was covered in the mud. I asked my mom what he was saying, and she told me that he was abandoned and was pleading with his parents in front of their house. to be let accepted back in. The combination of tears and desperate pleas made his voice sound pitiful and helpless. The worst part was when the parents went out and told him simply no and told him to leave and just walked back in their hut, shutting the door behind him, leaving him sobbing on the ground. I turned away onto the jeepney knowing that he would probably be left alone in the rainy season without shelter. I really didn't understand it then because I was so young, but looking back on it now, it was really sad. It breaks my heart knowing things like this happen every day all around the world. There was a man that my mother had been married to for 3 years named John. During the entire time of their marriage, John would abuse my family if we didn't do something that was perfect. I still remember having my door locked while I was changing and him having a screwdriver and taking off my door handle, cause what if a fire happened and I had my door locked was his excuse. Now fast forward a couple of months after my mother finally got the courage to divorce him, we move on with our lives to a new house and we were finally happy that we had no one to fear in our own household. My mother would constantly talk about how she was happy all of our lives were now safe. She would also talk about how he would never know where we lived and that he will no longer be involved in our lives. I woke up one morning to hear a voice in the house that wasn't normally there. I peek downstairs and I see my mother talking to someone through our bathroom door. She kept saying things like I love you so much, I'm so happy you're going to give me another chance. I was confused and curious who she was talking to, so I kept my distance and continued to peer down from upstairs. It was a 2-story house, the downstairs bathroom was across from the bottom of the stairs. John walked out of the bathroom. I had never been so scared and hurt in my entire life. Few days later I moved out to my grandparents and I now live there till I finish with high school. This man is still with my mother and my sisters. I check up on my little sisters from time to time to make sure they are healthy and well. Out of all the times I have seen him next to my mother, this was the most painful memory of them all. I was at a family restaurant called Gasto, and while waiting for a table, this 3-year-old girl was running around, and her 6-year-old brother watched her. She was happy and full of laughter, and a bit naughty, but it didn't damage the atmosphere or anything. It's nice to hear happy kids. She climbs up onto the sofa, right next to me, and leans against me. I didn't know what it was at first, so I looked down, and she was giving me this huge grin. I smiled back, but then looked forward. She kept rocking back and forth, giggling, leaning against me, happy to have made a friend, before she went back to sitting with her brother. I thought it was insanely cute. Her brother just looked sad and disappointed with her. By coincidence we were seated opposite her, and I watched her happy to get her food, a little hyperactive, but really desperate for some attention. Her obese mother was on her iPhone the entire time, her depressed looking brother just chiding her occasionally to sit down. After she'd eaten her child portion, she was still excited, talking to her mother and brother, neither of whom were interested in anything she was saying. She climbed down under the table to get out, booth style. Mother was blocking her exit, and she emerged and had this big smile on her face. I wasn't looking directly at her, but I saw her mother's arm move quickly and heard this loud smack. I looked and the girl was now holding her head, no longer smiling. My friend and I looked at each other, both speechless, and the little girl returned to her seat. Not crying, not smiling anymore. Her mother returned to her iPhone. The fact that she didn't cry made me think this wasn't an unusual occurrence. I then realized why her son didn't do anything other than sit and scold his sister. And I knew this happy little thing, just loving a sunny day and being out with people. I knew she'd be like her brother in a matter of years. When we left, I gave the little girl a big smile and a wave, and she smiled and waved back. And I vowed to myself never to treat any children I may have like that, or anybody at all. This shall be lost in the abyss of posts, but here's mine. I was out with my fella and his friend who is complete waste of damn space and oxygen. This fool managed to get a girl pregnant in high school she was going to abort, but no, he's too Christian for that, but not enough to abstain, and told her to take the abortion money and buy a prom dress instead. They ended up getting married because of the kid. They hate each other and were going to break up before they found out she was pregnant. Anyway, they had their son, and about a year after that had their daughter, also unplanned. Backstory needless to say, I hate this moron. We were talking, and such went out of faking nowhere idiot friend says, if either of my kids end up gay, they can find a new family basically. I'd pretty much disown them. I was so pissed off that I was shaking, and I couldn't breathe. I could only manage to inform him that he didn't deserve kids. I get pissed off just thinking about it. This oh-so moral idiot also thinks it's okay if his daughter grows up to be stripper, but God forbid if she ever finds love with another woman. Let's note this man calls his wife fat constantly when she isn't, and has an open relationship where he macks on the girl next to their apartment in front of his faking kids and tries to invite women from Craigslist to his filthy as fuck apartment. Rage. Worked at a video store when I was 18, and one day around 2ish in the afternoon when my manager and one other kid were on prepping new movies for the Tuesday release, a dad and his two boys walked into the stores and the boys were oddly quiet for being 7 or 8 years old. Nothing really to note, and they went about their business browsing the new release wall. The boys eventually did what kids do best and started to entertain themselves, running a bit etc. You could tell the dad had asked them to behave and they would, but of course that wouldn't last long. Eventually he'd had enough and must have grabbed one of the boy's arms, but from a corner of the store that was out of my view I heard the boy's voice, clear as day. One of those moments where everything seems to be totally silent so everyone hears what's going on. Daddy don't. It still hurts from last time. This of course immediately got the attention of every last person in the store. The father left with his boys and 2 moments later and a few somewhat angry looking men followed him from the store. They didn't corner him, and I'm not sure if they were yelling things at him, but he loaded his kids up and left. He didn't seem like he was abusing them or like he was uncontrollably angry, and thinking back to my childhood with 6 kids in the house and the inevitable spankings that happened and all the things we yelled to get out of them, it wouldn't surprise me if he had been legitimately punished by his father. I've always held on to that moment as a bit of perspective. I had zero idea of what was going on with that dad and his boys, but the mixture of confusion and anger that was quickly overridden by rage at a hurt child regardless of my lack of knowledge about the situation. I'll never know what was really going on, but I'll never forget the desperate sound in that boy's voice or the way it made me feel. Overheard. A 7-year-old little girl leaned over to her grandmother and said, "I have a secret, but mommy told me not to tell you." Grandmother says, "Then you don't need to tell me. If someone asks you to keep a secret, you should keep their trust." Little girl looks thoughtful and says, "It starts with a W." Grandma looks at the little girl and says, "Is your family moving?" Little girl's eyes get huge and she nods, totally surprised that the grandma guessed correctly. "Mommy and daddy took us to campfire the other night and said we don't have enough money for our house anymore, so we have to move away." Grandma looked like she was going to cry now. "Do you know if you're moving far away?" Little girl shook her head. So sad to see a kid put in that position. The mom told her the secret so she would say something. Awesome parent to make her kid feel bad about keeping a secret from her grandparent, on top of turning her world upside down by moving. Edit. I know the parents of the little girl, and the dad keeps starting his own businesses because he can't really keep a job for long. The mom opened a preschool, but they absolutely live beyond their means. Dad bought himself a Harley not long ago, along with some dirt bikes and quads. One of their 3 kids just recently broke his arm riding a dirt bike, and they have really limited health insurance. The house is a wreck and they don't care for any of their belongings. I'm not from a very wealthy family, so this summer I got a job babysitting my nephews, so I could afford to go to Disney World for a band trip next year. My first year of high school. My brother has been in a custody battle ever since the youngest was born. I'm pretty sure. My brother is a fit man and is an amazing father with his loving girlfriend of a year now. Both my nephews adore them, and they feel the same. Their mother on the other hand, isn't very good. I haven't seen her in about 4 years, but every time they come back from their mothers, they reek like piss and food, and sometimes the youngest has a bruise or a cut. Just this Monday, when they both woke up, I noticed a cut about the length of my pinky. I have small hands, so it's a miring finger, but I know many of you are older, So I say pinky for you guys, along the side of his face going to his ear. I asked him where he got it, and he just sank back in himself and said I don't know. I was so pissed and sad. When I texted my brother later, after telling my dad, and he suggested I text him about it, he responded that he came back from his mother's with it. I'm so glad my brother has primary custody of them. I really hope he wins full custody soon. This has happened several times before, including a burn on the oldest's forehead. Yes, he still has a scar. TLDR babysit my nephews. Youngest shows up with huge cut on face. Sinks and responds I don't know. I find out it was from his mother's. This has happened before. I knew a girl who lived with both her parents. They were still married to each other, but her father worked nights and her mother had her boyfriend over every single night. The daughter's room and her mother's room were right across from each other in a tiny little apartment. Every night the little girl was told to go to bed early. She would go to her room and lay there in the dark, trying to fall asleep. She never fell asleep though. She always stayed up late because every night she could hear her mother having sex. Clear as day. It was loud and it was nasty. After a few years of this going on every night, one night she wrote a note by her mom's door before heading into her own room. The note said, please, don't let him come over anymore. It makes me sad. Apparently her mom threw it in the garbage or something, and her boyfriend came over that night. It was the same routine. Her mother drinking, laughing loudly, having sex, and more drinking. It went on all night until the little girl's father came home at 7 AM. I was helping said friend clean her room one day because she was moving out. It's been about 10 years. I found the note and asked her about it. She told me in tears. Yet, her mother is still with that boyfriend and still married to her father. It's faked up. Knowing you're hurting your kid and continuing to do it. When I was about 7, some of the kids who lived in my neighborhood were pretty obviously neglected. The 8-year-old and 6-year-old had some ratty clothes, but the 5-year-old and the 3-year-old ran around outside in diapers and nothing else year round. There was a baby who was a few months old as well, but he was too small to be running around, so we didn't see him often, but he, like the others, was always just so dirty. They were mean, so the other neighborhood kids and I didn't really like to play with them, which probably didn't help matters much. One day the 5-year-old and the 6-year-old walked over to the yard I was playing in with some friends, and normally they would just throw rocks or stuff at us, so we were getting ready to move somewhere else, when we saw they had knives. Like, butcher's knives. Kitchen knives no kid should be touching unattended, much less carrying around outside. They said they were going to stab us, and we believed it, so we ran into my friend's mom and told her. She ran out and took the knives away and walked next door to their house. She knocks on the door and the mom answers holding the really dirty baby, and you can tell, just by looking at her, that she's drugged out of her mind. My friend's mom tells her that her kids had knives and were trying to stab us, so she should really keep her knives where they couldn't be reached. Without blinking an eye she says, it's not my fault they got them. I've had them locked outside all day. And she shuts the door. Doesn't take her knives, doesn't tell her kid stabbing is bad, just shuts the door. On the bright side, I ran into the kid who's a year older than me a few months back. His mom got clean, and his dad started staying home more once his wife wasn't drugged out all the time, so things got better. But it was just so sad that the mom didn't care at all that her kids could have killed someone. It was also sad that they didn't know any better because no one had bothered to teach them anything. Recently in Target I heard a mother order her 3-year-old child to get her a shirt off the rack in a small. Kid, eager to help and not able to read, brings back a medium. Mom screams at kid, "What are you, stupid or something?" I said a small. Prior to this interaction the little girl was eager to please, asked to help, tried to engage with her mom. After this girl just looked down at her shoes and said she was just trying to help. I was so angry I couldn't speak. I work with families and moms around child development and enhancing maternal bonding, and I literally was speechless. So many things could have been different. She could have asked her daughter to get her a shirt with the yellow tag. At Target the yellow equals small. Could have realized the girl couldn't read, and if she did no letter she could have said, "Get me one with an S on the hanger." Or, she could actually see how damaging her words were. I look back at this and know I should have said something. But with as much anger and blind rage I had, I would have ended up doing exactly to this woman what she did to her daughter. I remind myself that such behavior comes from a place of wounding and pain. When I was young I had a summer job at a restaurant/pizza place. I would walk home a lot because I would get off before it got to be too dark out, and I've always found the feeling of summer nights to be very relaxing, especially after standing in front of an oven for 8 to 10 hours. Well, I'm walking home one night after getting off early. It was 4th of July weekend and things were surprisingly slow. I was walking by some of the older lakefront houses, stopping occasionally to take in the fireworks people had been illegally firing off their boats into the night sky. While I was staring at some of these explosions, I heard someone screaming bloody murder from one of the summer homes I was passing by. I froze up completely, trying to figure out where it was coming from and if they were going to come after me next. After the next couple of shouts I figured out which house it was coming from and that they didn't know I was there. I could hear the voice of this woman begging this person don't do it. I still wasn't sure what exactly was going on, but I knew I probably couldn't stop whoever it was, since I was an out of shape teenager and had never been in a real fight before. I came closer to the house, not because I wanted to, but because I had to go that way to get to my house some miles away. I could now make out the sobs of a child and a man yelling, followed by more pleas from the woman. There was a blanket over the window facing the street I was walking down, but, I kid you not, all the lights in the home were on, so I could see the outline of a man holding some kind of strap in his hand, going up and down, followed by the sobs of the child and the screams of the woman yelling no. Please, please don't, no. It made me sick on so many levels. That there's such cruelty in the world, that I couldn't do anything to help them, that I just kept walking, that it wasn't even faking 8 PM, and that violent fuck had to do that on a goddamn holiday. Looking back, yes, I could have called the cops, but honestly I didn't want to have that kind of conversation with the police and my mother for the next 4 hours. I just wanted to get away. Every time I've gone past that house I wonder what happened to those people. I never see a car there, and I think I saw a for sale sign shortly before I moved away. It's been years, and I still think about that faking sheet every time July 4th weekend rolls around. I was walking back to the hotel after empty AC. My boyfriend and I heard a commotion in the parking garage near our hotel. We see this guy yelling at this woman. We watch for a few minutes, wondering what to do, until this guy hits the woman with her purse and then storms off. We rush up to her and ask her if she needs anything. Apparently they'd only been married for a short while, and she'd said that he'd been acting a lot different than before. She was shaking and crying the whole time. He had threatened to leave her where she was and take the car, saying that she could just call him, but she said that he had her wallet and keys. We offered to let her stay with us for the night until she could get things figured out. Apparently, they were arguing because they had been in a bar before, and the cops got called on the dude because he was being rowdy. She's very shaken up about the whole thing. The guy starts walking back toward us, and the woman starts freaking out, saying things like, "Oh god, if he sees you talking to me, he's going to be so mad, please leave, he's going to get so mad." And my boyfriend and I are thinking the worst. We don't know if this guy's armed, or if he'll attack us or anything. He comes up, very calm, and hands his wife a wallet, and says that they should talk it out. The woman was a little encouraged by us to say that she wanted to meet in a public place and talk it over. My boyfriend and I decide to keep walking on and bid the two goodnight. A few feet off I turned around and saw him dragging off this woman and yelling, "You what the faking cops to get called on me again, you stupid bitch." My boyfriend and I called the cops and told them which way he dragged her off. I'll never forget that moment. I hope she's doing alright. In the last year, also my last year of high school, I was working part-time at Wendy's and part-time at a local daycare. At the daycare was two of the cutest twin boys age 3. These boys were behind developmentally and sometimes quite hyper. Either way, overall extremely sweet. I work in the afternoons there after school. The owner of the daycare told me that the boys were always waiting at the front doors of the daycare every morning. They would be wearing yesterday's clothes, food on their faces, and worst of all, yesterday's diapers. They had bad diaper rash from sitting in the soiled diapers. The mother would drop them off as soon as possible and leave them there all day, and I literally mean all day. They were usually picked up right as the daycare closes around 6 p.m. Anyways, this is where working at Wendy's becomes relevant. I'm working drive-through window one evening when, who do you know it, the twins and their dead-beat mother and her shifty boyfriend come through. Immediately the boys light up and start shouting Jewel as they couldn't really say my name, Jewel. I smile wide to the boys and wave. Thank goodness they were in car seats. I then turn to the mother and hand her the crap she's going to feed her kids. At an hour much too late for a 3-year-old to be out of bed, may I add. She then snaps at me and asks how I know her kid's surprised that she didn't recognize me as we have talked before. I tell her I work with them at the daycare. She then angrily takes the food and drives off. I was so sad for those little boys. I made sure to help them explore their world and give them lots of hugs and cuddles when I was working because I knew for damn sure the mother wasn't giving them the love and attention they deserved. TLDR, a negligent mother of 2 boys I knew at a daycare came through my drive-through window, helped inspire me to get my early childhood education so I can help more kids like them. A few years ago, we lived in a house across the street from an affluent woman in her 80s. Shortly after we moved in, we heard through the neighborhood gossip mill that her 50-something son had just moved in with her following his recent divorce. We never really met or knew him, but could see him coming and going, and exchanged a few pleasantries and nods over time. His ex-wife and 2 sons, 8 to 10, would come to visit for a few days a few times a year. They lived in France, so they had to travel quite a distance to visit their father. One Christmas, the kids and ex came for a visit. The grandmother decided to throw an extravagant holiday party, and we saw a parade of party planners, caterers, and florists at the house. On the night of the party, we watched from across the street as the prominent partygoers came and went. The party wound down by about 11:30 or so. My wife and I went up to bed. At about 12:30, we awoke to a guttural roar from across the street, followed by a child's voice shouting, "Daddy, please don't hit me." I leapt from bed and looked out the window in time to see the front door of the house slam open and watched one of the boys sprint down the steps and across the deserted street, hiding behind a car on the other side. I grabbed the phone and called the police, who said they'd send a car. There were male and female voices. The ex-wife called the boy back to the house and things were quiet. A couple of minutes later, the ex-wife and the boys come out with their luggage and load up into their car, obviously headed to a hotel, when the cops roll up. She clearly had an awkward conversation with the cop and did not seem to be comfortable talking to him, but after a few minutes, the cops drove off and so did the kids and ex-wife. Never heard another word about it, and we moved away shortly thereafter, but I can still hear that kid's voice clear as a bell, and thinking about it makes me hug my own kids extra tight. Daddy, please don't hit me. Didn't overhear this, it's my own story. I could spend hours typing this out, but I'll try to keep it short and just hit the key points so you guys don't have to read too much. When I was small, my parents were the most amazing people in the world, especially my dad. I had loads of friends, but I always preferred spending time with my parents because they were so amazing and so much better than everyone else. My dad is an absolute genius, 1590/1600 on his SAT, presidential scholarship to MIT, etc. And my mother is an expert at cooking and knitting big soft blankets and all that other mum stuff. I thought they were the coolest. This all changed as I grew older. When I was younger my parents used to fight a lot, but I don't know many married couples who don't, so that was fine, and after a while I got used to it. They also didn't think I was smart at all until they found out I had a genius IQ, 146, beach, and got moved into the gifted program at school. My family used to joke that my older brother would get my dad's business and I could just live on a beach somewhere while they send me money every now and then. Even now, that mentality seems to be the same. They never really listen to the things I say or my opinions. They just cast them aside when a problem presents itself until I have to scream what I'm saying into their ears, and then they finally find out what I said in the first place was right. Telling them I'm right and they should listen always results in and stop being such an arrogant asshole or something along those lines. Perhaps it's because I'm the youngest person in my family of 4, but it seems my opinions don't matter. At age 12, I found out that my dad had another family which he kept in secret. He has a wife and 2 daughters which live far away, and he still to this day goes on dating sites looking for new women and promises them marriage. I've never spoken to him about it, since I'm sure he'd get furious. He has serious anger issues and do something drastic. I don't think he feels any guilt. One day when I was 14-year-old, my mother woke me up to say goodbye as she was leaving to visit her sick father. This was a routine thing, so I didn't think anything of it, but looking back on it, she was crying when saying bye. After 4 months of not hearing from her, I figured she was busy looking after her dad. She called and informed me that she was never coming back. She did come back, though, after a couple months of my dad and brother pleading for her to return. However, one night she sat me down at the table with my brother and told me that she was leaving for good. Again, I didn't care at the time that she was leaving, but the fact that she had planned this and told my brother but not me. My brother, who I share everything with, knew as well and even he kept it a secret. Did they think I wouldn't understand? I know my dad is an asshole, but now my mother has abandoned me twice in secret and my brother didn't even tell me about it. Who the fuck do I have left? Now I'm a little older, but definitely not old, 17, and I've come to terms with all of this, but it still leaves a sour taste in my mouth. My dad will never change. He still looks for other women to raise children with and marry, and he still frequently tells me how I'm a worthless, stupid asshole. My mum is back with us, but I don't know for how long. It's nice to see her, though. My brother is still my best friend, and he always will be. Although, he really scares me. It seems he's becoming more and more like our father, and honestly, that's the only thing that gets me now. I don't want to see him become the same person as my dad, but I can't ever say anything because my family is still convinced I'm nothing but a stupid asshole. I guess I must be stupid for forgiving them for everything they've done. If you've read all this, then don't worry about me. I just wanted to contribute to this nice little thread. TLDR, my mum has abandoned me twice and my dad has another family in secret and still looks for other women to marry and have children with. I was at Goodwill a few weeks ago looking for a mug. At the cashier, there was a long line as there were a few items without prices, and there was a grandmother and her 4 to 6-year-old granddaughter in line in front of me. I overheard their conversation. It went like this: granddaughter, look grandma. Counting on fingers, my movie and toy only cost $5. Grandma, they cost that much? You'd better put one back. Granddaughter, could we get both and next time you can have 2 things and I have none? Grandma, have you really been good enough to get $5 worth of toys today? Granddaughter, yes, grandma. I did all my chores and I've been really good. Clinging to her items. Grandma, well, I don't see why you should have $5 to spend when grandma's items only cost $3. Does that sound fair to you? Granddaughter, no grandma. Grandma, go put one back. Granddaughter, yes, grandma. She ended up putting the movie back and keeping the toy. But good grief, that grandma could have afforded $2 more on her granddaughter. She was getting a $3 hat and could have delayed that. The sound of sadness in that little girl's voice was haunting. I don't think she gets many things at all. I worked in childcare in my late teens. My class was 5 to 10-year-olds for after school care. There was a family of 4 kids, 3 of which were in my class. The oldest girl was 10, the youngest in my class was functioning, but very autistic. Anyway, these kids were the sweetest, kindest, most amazing children you would ever hope to meet. Their mother was a different story. She was a nice woman, but she was someone who had gotten in trouble with the law and worked the system. 2 separate events always stick in my mind. One time the mom had done something, I have no idea what, and the police came to pick up the kids. The oldest girl was so excited to ride with police. We asked if she had done that before, and she replied, oh yeah. We got to ride in a police car after mommy took something from Target. We had never seen the kid's dad, only heard about him. But one day the dad was going to pick the kids up, and he was going to have them for the weekend. The oldest girl said, I like it when we go to my dad's house, because then we get to eat. Turns out the 10-year-old is tasked with raising the family while mom does who knows what. She has to cook and clean and make sure her siblings get their homework done. I'm CF, but this was the only time I had ever wanted to adopt kids so badly, just to give them a better life and keep them from going down the same path as their mom. Buried, but whatever. When my son was born, and while still at the hospital I shared a room with another mother. The dad showed up and stayed with her. The mother was missing a few teeth. The father looked rough as well, like they both had a hard life. Then the rest of the family showed up. I overheard the new dad complaining about how they'd be better off on welfare because they would get more money, and the grandpa/uncles trying to get the dad to go out for a few drinks. It was morning. In all honesty, I nearly smacked the shit out of the grandpa because he peeked at me through the curtain separating us and was like, "Oh, that's big guy you have there. Ours is tiny." Like he wished she had a boy. The men left. Where were the grandma/aunts? And the mom finally got some rest until two girls show up, and one of them, who looked very young, talked about when her baby girl was born and that she was 2 pounds because she smoked during pregnancy. Fuck. And stuff about CFS. My hubby comes back from picking stuff up from home for me, and the men from the other family return as well, smelling like alcohol. TLDR, baby girl is going to have a rough life ahead of her. I live in an apartment complex in Arizona, and one day me and my friends were hanging out on my porch. My friend Q said to me, "Hey, where did that lone baby come from?" I looked down to see a little girl about 2 or 3 years old wearing only a diaper looking directly at us and holding an empty bottle. Her eyes were saying help me. At first I looked around waiting for a parent to come from somewhere to get this little girl. I should also mention that right in front of my apartment is a small pond with a bridge and a fountain. She was standing almost at the edge of the pond. After about a minute or so I start to walk down there towards the little girl. I pick her up and she lets me with no hesitation. She starts saying my mommy really soft. I was holding her looking around for an open door. Other kids, anyone? I kept asking her, even though she couldn't answer me. Where's your mommy? After about 3 or 4 minutes I look up at my friends, who are taking pictures of us. Like, what do I do? My friend Q was mouthing go to the office. So I walk into the office. I'm mixed and this little girl was olive skin toned, so I'm sure she looked like she belonged to me. They start to ask how can they help me. When I look at them and say I just found this baby wandering by the pond, they were horrified. They were all like, what? What do you mean you found a baby? I said exactly what I just said. I found this baby and I don't know who she belongs to. So me and one of the other ladies go back outside and just start walking, hoping to find an open door or something. We walk one building past mine and see a door slightly ajar. The apartment lady walks up and knocks, half walking in, saying she's so and so with the office. Is there anyone here? I thought for sure we were gonna find someone dead. Nope, some punker's teenager comes out of the bedroom holding a cigarette she was getting ready to smoke. She looked like she had just got done smoking something. I assume meth crack, because the house didn't smell like weed. The girl that comes out is all, "Oh my god mama, how did you get out?" Takes the baby from me, doesn't ask us any questions or even say thank you, and just shuts the door in our face. Me and the apartment lady both look at each other like, what the fuck do we do now? It made me sick. I wanted to call CPS, but for whatever reason we did not. I kept an eye on that apartment for weeks and later realized that the girl who was watching her was her older sister, not her mother. That made me feel a little better, but I was still mad at the parents for letting their dumb kid watch their little one. I still feel like if anything ever happens to that kid, it will be my fault. I was educated in a renowned Catholic girls' school which was famous for producing top-tier students. When I was 8, I was thrown into the worst class in school, class 3. I didn't have good results then because I was a slacker, but I'm doing relatively well now compared to my classmates. Even though I didn't study as hard, I still did well because I came from a relatively well-off family and had parents who instilled in me a love of reading. I'll always remember this one girl in class 3 who was an out-of-control troublemaker, though I always thought she was a breath of fresh air compared to the rest of the ultra-obedient, ultra-indoctrinated goody two-shoes. She was always quite a loudmouth, had poor impulse control, fighting with teachers, and running to the principal's office claiming the teacher was being abusive etc. and was super pretty. In fact, she was actually pretty popular because of her fearlessness. One day she came to school looking like a train wreck, with red marks all over her hands and tears in her eyes. According to rumors, her father was a compulsive gambler and severe alcoholic and her mother was a bus driver. The day before, her abusive father burst into the house and took all their money. The next morning she and her mother got into an argument and her mother started caning her. I think it was out of stress. My friends told me that her mother wanted her to do better in life than her, and that was the reason for her tough love. Her mother was not an educated woman and I guess that was her way of showing her that she cared, as strange as it sounds. Anyway, there are more stories about this girl and her mother, but this is the gist of it I guess. My best friend growing up. Her father passed away from cancer when she was 5, in the living room in a hospital bed on hospice. Her mom went on a complete alcoholic binge after that. Everyone knew she was a drunk. I remember being 12 years old and waking up my friend's mom to make sure she made it to work. I remember dumping her alcohol or just cleaning the house for my friend to come home to some sort of normalcy. As we got older, my friend's house turned into the party house since her mom didn't give a fuck. It was like my mission in life to wrangle that woman away from her behavior in public. We even had to drive to the police station on Halloween, at 15, no less, because her mom had escaped and toilet papered the neighbors dressed as a nun. It was all insane. Once, her mom came home drunk. This is the day she tells her daughter, an amazing cook, that oh, I didn't send in the financial aid, you aren't going to culinary school the day before her scheduled flight out of her faked life. My friend was practically hysterical. Her mom walks in and starts giving her shit, picking on her. Next thing I know, it gets out of hand and her mom yells, your dad and I were going to get a divorce. He was a cheating bastard and I'm happy he is dead. My friend held her dad in the highest esteem. If her dad was around, then obviously her life would be different, happy, etc. I will never ever forget how defeated my friend looked. It's like she lived a lifetime of shame and embarrassment in that exact moment. Her mom has since sobered up a little bit. Her speech isn't as bad. And my friend is graduating with a registered nursing degree in January. After seeing so many posts on alcoholism, I thought I'd add one of my own that really gets to me. I have a wonderful friend who has helped with many of my problems, paranoia, manic depression, and I like to think that I have also helped her. Example equals I believe you are perhaps one of my bravest friends and one of the best people I have ever met. You have shown me true pain while I've known you, and you've helped me stretch my shredded life together, even though it's not all stitched yet. But don't ever let beat you. Second deadly sin, you have to find a way to see them for what they are. Your imagination, you'll overcome this, because if this damn meeting crap doesn't help, I'll look up something that will, because I need my friend. You will be okay. Just remember your second deadly sin, no one will ever hate you. You're so unstable it hurts. You're funny, even when you try not to be, and you always put others first. I just hope my poor comforting helps. I'd like to believe that I really do help her, but one of the many times I had been relaxing with her and gone out for a coffee, we got onto the subject of her parents, which I'm still amazed at. Her mother was an alcoholic who had lost custody of her from the constant drinking and disregard for her own daughter and son, and she couldn't live with her dad because he had his own mental problems being abusive, so she had to live with her grandmother and her boyfriend. One of the things she had told me is still in my head whenever I think of her parents, which was, I wish I had my mum back. I wish I had a family. As much as there are horrible stories much worse than my own, hearing her say that was one of the most heart-wrenching things I've ever heard. So strange to see someone so happy have such horrible backgrounds. 4 years ago, me and my brother were visiting our grandma in Delaware. There are 2 parts to this story actually. Story 1, we went to a mall close to her house, and since I was older, I was 16, and my brother was 13 at the time, my grandma allowed me to go wander by myself for a little, while 15 minutes later, we meet up, and she starts going ballistic on me saying that I could have gotten hurt badly. I said I was sorry. Then she decides to slam me up against a wall as hard as she can, saying that bad things will happen to me like that. After that, She is laughing and saying to other people that I'm a stupid little sheet. My brother looked like he was going to cry really bad, and I was scared out of my mind. Story 2. A few days after the mall incident, Grandma takes us to Cold Stone Creamery for ice cream. We are the only people in the store, and my brother is talking to the employee about a possible new flavor of ice cream they could make. My grandma is becoming extremely impatient and tells him to hurry up. He tells her to be patient, then she goes absolutely insane. She drags him across the store and throws him into a chair and bites his lip and gave him extremely nasty scratches on his arms, causing him to bleed pretty badly while he is screaming in agony, and she says to shut up and suck it up. Meanwhile, I'm bawling my eyes out as Grandma rushes us both out of the store and drives us home. We are both absolutely terrified. We go home early and are taken to our local child protective services a few days later to explain what happened. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but I believe it is the law in the state of Delaware that any physical form of child abuse must be reported to the authorities immediately. The state police confronted her and gave her fine for child abuse and a very severe warning. She did not go to jail, thankfully. A day later, I had a nightmare of it all happening again and woke up crying my eyes completely dry. We have never visited Grandma since then. TLDR, my grandma slammed me against a wall laughing about it and made my brother bleed because of ice cream. It was a hard time for both of us indeed. Update 4 years later, and all has been forgiven. We are talking to Grandma again, but we told her that my brother and I do not want to visit her for a very long time. Am I still mad? Kinda, but I'm a forgiving person and I'm willing to just move on and forget about it. This isn't something I overheard, but saw firsthand. A few years ago I was a junior in high school and there were 2 exchange students that I became friends with. One girl was from Kuwait and the other from France. We all took a class together with another one of my friends and became really close. One Friday night we spent the night at the house the girl from Kuwait was staying at. The father and daughter were home, but the mother was out of town. The minute I met the father I got the creeps. He would stare at us, wink at us, and was a little mean. We had heard stories of the daughter hitting the exchange student and just being a complete beach to her. We all went back to my house the next day and told my mom what was going on, and she immediately told the exchange student that she was not going back to that house and he ended up taking her in. She actually ended up leaving early because she hated it here and was rude to us, even though we tried to make her time here more enjoyable. I wish we had taken the French girl in instead. The family she was staying with were horrible too. She was here in a program that didn't make her go to school, but she did anyways, to interact with students her age. The mom didn't like that and told her every day. They made her clean their entire house, watch their daughter every day, made her pay for her own meals, even though they were being paid to keep her. We only found out about it after we took the first girl in and had no extra room. I still keep in touch with her and she is always inviting me to come stay with her. The world needs more people like you. I'm a foster care social worker. I support and supervise foster carers, but I tell each and every one of my carers that I could never do their job. Here in the UK, I regularly hear people commenting on how well paid foster carers are, but what those people never take into consideration is the absolute selflessness and dedication that foster caring demands. When you break a carer fee down into 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, it is unquestionably the most poorly paid task out there. It takes dedication and needs to be a calling in life rather than a career choice. 2 nights ago, I spent until 10 PM in a carer's home helping to ensure that 3 little girls were safe as they'd just been taken into care after being found wandering the streets at 2:30 am on the previous night. One of those girls arrived with no shoes on her feet. They had no concept of boundaries or routines and didn't really have an understanding of what pajamas were. But I went home at 10 PM. Once things were settled, my carer was left to start the grassroots fight to establish the routines and boundaries that will keep those children safe. Anyone, including yourself who can dedicate their lives to other people's children to that extent, deserve medals the size of dustbin lids. I just happen to know that those people would also just shrug their shoulders, say it's no big deal and just get on with it. My mum told me these stories when she worked in a school in a council estate area. I can't do this. It's too hard. I'm too dumb. One little boy, when he didn't understand something. Why do you think you're dumb? My daddy tells me that every day. This one makes me sad. A little girl in the class has some quite severe social problems. She won't acknowledge anyone she doesn't know. If she goes into a new class, she will just ignore the teacher for weeks. If any adult talks to her who she doesn't know, she will just ignore them. The reason: her dad killed himself when she was 3. I don't know how much she saw, but she was very messed up because of it. One day she is working with my mum and tells her, I don't have a daddy, he killed himself. My mum told this little girl that I didn't have a dad either, and she wasn't alone. This little girl charged over to me with the rest of her class when I went for a visit a few years ago. I was hugged by about 20 kids at once. She was standing back a little, made eye contact, and smiled at me before looking away quickly. This was a major thing for this little girl. She didn't know me, but she looked and smiled right at me. All the teachers were shocked, and after I worked with some of the very problem kids, I was asked if I was going to become a teacher because I was so good with them. I kept the worst kids under control without much effort. They had some mental and some severe behavioral problems. I could never be a teacher. I had a hard time in school and I just can't watch other kids go through what I did. Another was hearing about these kids who came to school starving, and the only food they got was from the breakfast club and their school lunch. They didn't have shoes that fit their feet, clothes that fit, but their parents all had the latest games and consoles. There was also this little boy. He was a really nice kid from a bad family. He had cerebral palsy, but he was mobile with the help of leg splints and daily exercises to keep his muscles from seizing up. His worker used to get really angry after every break from school, including weekends. His parents would never do any of his exercises with him, and the poor kid could barely move after long periods of time at home. I have known this guy, Tim, since I could remember. I never really talk much to him, but he is the sweetest and nicest person in the world. He had been bullied since middle school, and it got pretty bad his freshman year of high school. I didn't know who had been bullying him, since I was at a different school at the time, but I really wanted to hit them in the face. 2 days ago during band camp, 4 guys in my section were talking proudly about how they drew swastikas all over Tim's notebooks and then told everybody he was a neo-Nazi. Nobody believed them, because Tim is again the nicest person on earth and is a strong Christian, but the administration got concerned and called Tim's parents. It was extremely embarrassing to him. I could not believe this was coming from my section. I turned to the 4 guys, all over 6 inches taller than 5 feet 2 inches me, and told them to leave Tim alone. They all laughed at me, and there's nothing else I can really do, because everyone already knows that they were the ones to bully Tim, but there was already very little, mind you, punishment given. It broke, and continues to break, my heart when I heard that said. Sort of related, I recently had a close friend pass, and that day I was just a wreck. We all were. He was a huge part of our group, and loved by everyone. However, aside from a couple of times throughout the day I just needed to be alone for a minute, or to process what was going on, I had managed to hold myself together rather well. When I got out of work, a bunch of us who knew him met up to just be together that evening. I walk in the house and hug my niece, not his child, but a child of another very close friend. She's 3 1/2. And when I hug her, she looks at me and says, "Secretary Arson, I miss Phil. Mommy said that he's gone." Phil is the name we'll give to the friend. I lost my shit. I had to go for a walk around the block and just calm myself down, cause holy shit, I couldn't process the fact that she understood what was going on. I remembered at about her age, when my great grandmother died, my parents had said that God had come to take her away. I then spent the next hour running around the house looking for God. The whole concept of death and loss just really didn't hit me. It's amazing what kids pick up, and amidst the 10,000 requests to go play hide and seek, she really spent the entire day trying to cheer everybody up. About 2 months ago I was sitting at the central bus station in town waiting for my bus to get in, and there was this Muslim lady, I think, arguing with her son about that fact, that he couldn't eat some things the other kids from his class could eat. He was about 6 to 8 years old, I don't know. So anyway, right after she tells him something stupid like because I and Alice say so or some shit. Can't remember exactly. I locked an eye contact with her, and she gave me a nasty look, because she noticed I was eavesdropping. So I went over to the little store that sells like burgers, hot dogs, magazines, candy, beverages etc. and bought myself a bacon hot dog, sat down directly across from her, like 3 to 4 meters between the seats, stared her dead into the center of her eyes, and took a bite. She looked like she got really upset and her kid gave me a big smile. Still laugh about it every time I remember the incident or whatever I should call it. Really felt bad for the kid having his parents' religion pushed on him, and she pinched him once, right after she said something like, because that's just the way it is. So technically she was abusing her child. Any physical punishment to children is child abuse, and I just wanted to fuck with her for being a beach wish shed. Just explain her beliefs to him instead, and let him be free to choose his own and question the religion she chooses to force into his head. Edit. Something plus sorry for bad grammar, spelling etc. I'm a foreigner.